The land devours the weak and spits out their bones. Eleanor Reed knew this truth in her marrow, had watched it claim her husband Michael be leaving her alone with a dying ranch and a framed military commendation she could never bring herself to look at directly. The people of redemption were already taking bets on which day she would surrender. Rumors swirled about the transcontinental railroad coming through these parts, transforming worthless wilderness into gold for whoever held the deeds. But Eleanor had promises to keep. On the night of the worst dust storm in 3 decades, when the wind screamed through the cracks in the walls like tortured souls, Eleanor heard another sound beneath the howl. Metal striking metal, leather snapping, and the labored breathing of horses. On her porch lay a man bleeding his life into the boards, and behind him 10 horses bearing saddlebags heavy with a stolen Civil War legacy, a treasure that could save her land or be her death sentence. The wind stole her breath as she dragged the stranger inside. His blood left a trail across her floor, but it was what he carried that would mark them both forever. The dust was a living thing, malevolent, impatient. It found every crack in the weathered cabin walls, every gap in the ill-fitting window frames. It coated Eleanor Reed's skin, her hair, the inside of her lungs, with a fine, persistent grit that no amount of scrubbing could fully remove. 2 years since Michael's death, and the land was still trying to scour away any trace of human presence. Eleanor sat at her rough-hewn table, a single oil lamp casting long shadows across the cabin's interior. Before her lay the homestead certificate, the edges worn from frequent handling. 160 acres, 5 years of blood and sweat poured into this unforgiving soil. Michael had been so proud the day they'd built the required 12 by 14-foot cabin, humble as it was. 3 more months, and they would have received the final deed. 3 months too many. Her fingers traced the embossed seal of the United States government. By law, as Michael's widow, she could complete the proving up period. By reality, every force in this territory seemed determined to prevent it. The cattle were dying, the well was running low, and Maxwell Harding would return soon enough with another insulting offer for her land. The framed military commendation hung on the wall opposite her bed, Michael's service with the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, one of the first African-American units in the Union Army, recognized for bravery at Fort Wagner. Eleanor hadn't been able to look at it directly since the funeral. Tonight was no different. The storm announced itself with a low, distant moan that grew steadily into a banshee's wail. Eleanor moved with practiced efficiency, securing shutters, stuffing rags beneath the door covering the meager food supplies. When the first blast hit the cabin, it shuddered like a living thing. "Not tonight," she whispered to the darkness. "You don't get to take anything more tonight." For an hour, the world outside ceased to exist, reduced to a howling void of dust and wind. Eleanor huddled by the small fireplace, the flames dancing erratically with each new gust that found its way down the chimney. The storm's rhythm had become familiar, almost hypnotic, when a new sound cut through the calm, a heavy thud against her front door. Eleanor froze, straining to hear. Not the wind, something solid, living. Another impact followed by a sound that raised the hair on her arms, a horse's panicked whinny. The rifle was in her hands before she registered, reaching for it. 5 rounds in the magazine, 1 in the chamber. Michael had taught her to shoot before they had even reached the territory. "Land's no good to you if you can't defend it," he'd said, a third impact splintering the wood around the latch. Eleanor positioned herself behind the table rifle, aimed steady at the door. "I'm armed," she called out, voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. "State your business or move on." Instead of an answer, she heard a pained groan followed by the distinct sound of a body collapsing on her porch. Then came the nervous shuffling of not one horse but many, their tack jingling against the storm's roar. Curiosity warred with caution. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles away, the nearest town 15. No one traveled in a storm like this unless they were desperate or dangerous, often both. Decision made, Eleanor moved to the window, keeping the rifle ready. Carefully, she pushed aside the edge of the oilcloth covering the glass and peered out into the maelstrom. The sight stole her breath. 10 horses stood huddled together in her yard, their coats dark with sweat and dust, their eyes wide with fear. Heavy canvas packs were strapped to their backs, and they were all connected by lead ropes to a man. He lay face down on her porch, one arm outstretched toward her door, the ropes tangled around him in a macabre web. "Damn it all," Eleanor muttered. She unbolted the door, bracing herself against the assault of wind and dust. The man didn't move as she stepped onto the porch. Blood pooled beneath him, black in the dim light. Gunshot wound, she realized, noting the torn fabric and telltale smell. For a moment, Eleanor considered closing the door, pretending she'd seen nothing. This man's troubles were not hers. She had enough of her own. But something, perhaps Michael's voice in her memory, wouldn't let her. With strength born of years working the land, Eleanor grabbed the man under his arms and dragged him across the threshold, leaving the horses trembling in the yard. He was heavy, solid muscle beneath soaked clothing. His dark hair was matted with blood from a gash along his temple, and his face, what she could see of it beneath the grime, was all hard angles and stubborn lines. After securing the door against the storm, Eleanor returned to the stranger. He was alive barely. His breathing was shallow, his skin alarmingly cold. Acting on instinct refined by necessity, she cut away his shirt, revealing a gunshot wound in his left shoulder and a body mapped with old scars. As she cleaned and bandaged the wound, her fingers brushed against something hard beneath his undershirt. A leather cord around his neck held a military badge, Union Army Intelligence Bureau, and a small brass key. "Who are you?" she murmured, though she expected no answer. The stranger remained unconscious as Eleanor worked his features, relaxing slightly as the laudanum she administered took effect. When she had done all she could for him, her thoughts turned to the horses still outside, exposed to the fury of the storm. Wrapping her shawl tightly around her head and face, she ventured back into the howling darkness. The horses, exhausted and frightened, offered little resistance as she led them one by one to her small barn. As she untied the heavy packs to relieve their burden, one of the canvas bags split open, spilling its contents onto the straw-covered floor. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. Gold, raw, unrefined nuggets and dust gleaming dully in the lantern light. With trembling hands, she opened another pack and another. All the same, more gold than she had ever seen, more than she had imagined existed in the whole territory. A chill that had nothing to do with the wind seeped into her bones. This was not the modest find of a lucky prospector. This was a fortune the kind men killed for. The kind men had apparently already tried to kill for. Eleanor secured the barn, hiding the gold as best she could beneath hay and old sacks. Her mind raced with possibilities, each more dangerous than the last. By harboring this man and his gold, she had made herself complicit in whatever violence had occurred. Yet turning him out would mean certain death, if not from his wounds, then from the men who had inflicted them. When she returned to the cabin, the stranger was awake, propped up on one elbow, his eyes, clear and gray as winter ice, fixed on the door. In his right hand, he held a knife she hadn't found when searching him. "The horses," he said, his voice a rough whisper. "Safe in my barn," Eleanor replied, keeping her distance, "along with what they're carrying." A tense silence stretched between them, broken only by the storm's continued assault on the cabin. "You should have left me out there," he finally said. "Probably," Eleanor agreed, "but I didn't." The man studied her, his gaze assessing everything from the rifle she'd placed within reach to the calluses on her hands. "What's your name?" he asked. "Eleanor Reed. This is my ranch." "Gabriel Winters." He winced as he shifted position. "I'm obliged for the help, Mrs. Reed, but you need to know there are men coming. Dangerous men." "Because of the gold," she stated flatly. A shadow passed over his face. "Yes, and they won't care who gets in their way." 3 days passed before the storm finally released its grip on the land. 3 days of uneasy coexistence within the cabin's confines. Gabriel's fever had spiked the first night, leaving him delirious, muttering names and places Eleanor didn't recognize. One name recurred: Marcus. By the third day, Gabriel was strong enough to sit at her table, though the effort clearly cost him. They had established a cautious routine, exchanging only the words necessary for survival. He ate the food she provided, accepted her medical attention with stoic gratitude, and volunteered nothing about himself or the gold. Eleanor didn't press. The less she knew, the less danger she was in, or so she told herself. But curiosity burned beneath her practical exterior. "Harding will be by today," she said as she placed a bowl of thin porridge before him. "He's a land agent. Comes every week to check if I'm ready to sell." Gabriel's eyes narrowed. "Does he usually come alone?" "Yes, he's not the type to dirty his hands. Just circling like a vulture waiting for me to fail." Gabriel nodded, understanding the implication. a witness, a complication. If he asks, I'm your cousin, he said, here to help with the ranch. Eleanor almost laughed at the absurdity of it. No one will believe that. They'll believe it more than the truth. She couldn't argue with that logic. Maxwell Harding arrived shortly after noon, his buggy raising a plume of dust visible long before he reached the ranch. Eleanor met him on the porch, her face composed into a neutral mask that betrayed none of the turmoil of the past days. Harding was a man who took up more space than his physical form warranted. His suit was too fine for the territory, his manner too polished. Everything about him spoke of misplaced civilization, of Eastern money, and ambition transplanted to soil that rejected such things. Mrs. Reed, he called out with manufactured concern as he approached. That was quite a storm. I was worried about you out here all alone. As you can see, Mr. Harding, I'm still standing, and not alone anymore. She gestured toward the barn where Gabriel was visible, seemingly occupied with repairing a broken latch. The bandage on his shoulder was hidden beneath a borrowed shirt. Harding's smile faltered momentarily. A hired hand, times must be improving. Family, Eleanor corrected. My cousin, here to help with the proving up. Harding's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. How fortunate. Though I must remind you, Mrs. Reed, that the Homestead Act has specific requirements about improvements to the land. A woman alone might find those challenging to meet within the required time frame. I'm aware of the law, Mr. Harding, Eleanor replied coolly. All 160 acres, 5 years residence, a dwelling no less than 12 by 14 feet, cultivation and improvement of the land. We've met every requirement. Something like surprise flickered across Harding's face before he masked it with another smile. Of course, still my offer stands. A fair price given the circumstances. No need to struggle through another season. The ranch is not for sale. Harding's composure slipped, revealing a flash of the calculating man beneath the veneer. You should reconsider, Mrs. Reed. There are rumors about the railroad survey. Properties in this region could change hands quickly in the coming months. Eleanor's heart quickened at the mention of the railroad, but she kept her expression neutral. All the more reason to hold on to what's mine. What's yours? Harding chuckled, the sound devoid of humor. My dear, nothing is truly yours until that final deed is in your hand. And so many things can happen in these last few months of proving up. Accidents, misunderstandings about property lines, paperwork, lost in transit. The threat was thinly veiled, but Eleanor stood her ground. Good day, Mr. Harding. As the land agent's buggy disappeared over the ridge, Gabriel approached from the barn, his face grim. He knows something. About you. About the land. Gabriel's eyes scanned the horizon. The railroad survey isn't just a rumor. They're finalizing the route. Eleanor frowned. How would you know that? Because it's why my partner was killed. That evening, as shadows lengthened across the yard, Gabriel finally told his story, or parts of it. He had been a scout for the Union Army Intelligence Bureau during the war, skilled at moving through enemy territory undetected. After the war, he'd become a bounty hunter of sorts, tracking men who had evaded justice. His partner, Marcus Sullivan, had been a railway engineer working on the Transcontinental Project. Marcus had discovered irregularities in the survey maps, evidence that someone with inside knowledge was buying up land along the proposed route, manipulating the survey to increase their holdings value. Marcus started asking questions. Gabriel set his voice tight. A week later, he was dead, shot in the back outside a saloon in Redemption. And the gold? Eleanor asked. Gabriel hesitated, weighing how much to tell her. That's where things get complicated. Before he could continue, Eleanor noticed movement on the ridge to the east, a rider silhouetted against the setting sun watching the ranch. When she pointed it out, Gabriel's expression darkened. Get inside, he ordered, all trace of the wounded man gone. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me. He was already moving toward the barn, his right hand reaching for something tucked in his belt. A revolver she hadn't realized he possessed. Eleanor wanted to protest, to demand more answers, but the urgency in his voice brooked no argument. From the cabin window, she watched as Gabriel mounted one of his horses, the strongest of the 10, and rode out toward the ridge. The watcher turned and disappeared over the horizon, Gabriel in pursuit. Hours passed. Night fell thick and moonless. Eleanor kept the lamps unlit, moving through the darkness by memory, the rifle a constant companion. Every sound, the settling of the cabin, the distant call of a coyote, sent her heart racing. Near midnight, hoofbeats approached from the east. Eleanor positioned herself by the window, rifle ready. Relief flooded her when she recognized Gabriel's silhouette. She unbolted the door to admit him, noticing immediately the fresh blood on his sleeve and the grim set of his mouth. "One of Blackwood's men," he said without preamble. "Scouting ahead. Did you?" He'll report back that the ranch is occupied by a woman and a hired hand. Nothing more. Gabriel's tone made it clear the man had lived through not without persuasion. "Who is Blackwood?" Gabriel sank into a chair, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. "Charles Blackwood, former colonel in the Union Army, now a principal investor in the Central Pacific Railroad, and the man who killed Marcus." Eleanor filled a tin cup with water and passed it to him. Why would a railroad investor kill an engineer? Because Marcus discovered that Blackwood was using military intelligence to identify the railroad's route before it was public knowledge. He's been buying land along the path for pennies, land that will be worth fortunes once the railroad comes through. Gabriel's knuckles whitened around the cup, and he's not doing it legally. "The homestead certificates," Eleanor breathed, understanding dawning. "He's forging them, invalidating them." Gabriel looked at her sharply. "How would you know about that?" Eleanor hesitated, then moved to a trunk in the corner. From beneath carefully folded linens, she withdrew a leather portfolio. "Before I married Michael, I worked as a clerk for Judge Hamilton in St. Louis. He specialized in land dispute cases." She opened the portfolio, revealing neatly arranged legal documents. "I helped many freedmen and veterans complete their homestead applications. I know exactly what valid certificates look like." Gabriel stared at her with new appreciation. "You're not just a rancher's widow." "No more than you're just a bounty hunter," she countered. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Fair enough." Eleanor spread the documents on the table. "Harding's threats make more sense now. He's working for Blackwood, trying to force me off my land because your ranch sits at a critical junction for the proposed route," Gabriel finished. "Ideal location for a water stop or depot." The pieces were falling into place, but one crucial element remained unexplained. "And the gold? How does that fit into all this?" Gabriel's expression closed again. "That's not something you need to concern yourself with." Eleanor straightened, indignation flaring. "I have 10 horses full of gold in my barn, a wounded man at my table, and killers watching my ranch. I think I'm already concerned." Their standoff was interrupted by the sound of paper crinkling. Gabriel reached into his vest pocket and withdrew a folded document, yellowed with age, and stained with what looked suspiciously like dried blood. He placed it on the table between them. "I found this among Marcus's things after he was killed. It's what started all this." Eleanor carefully unfolded the paper. It was a military dispatch marked confidential, bearing the signature of a Union general she recognized from her time with the judge. The contents made her blood run cold. It detailed the disappearance of a gold shipment valued at $100,000 from a Union Army depot in the final days of the Civil War. The gold, designated as war funds, was presumed stolen by a group of deserters. The dispatch ordered all military personnel to be on alert for any sign of the missing shipment. "This is a fortune," Eleanor whispered. "But why would Marcus have this document, and how did you end up with the gold?" "Marcus didn't have just this document," Gabriel replied, his voice low. "He had evidence suggesting the gold never disappeared at all. It was diverted, by order of someone high in the Union command." "For what purpose?" Gabriel's eyes met hers, weighing her trustworthiness one final time. "That's what I was trying to find out when Blackwood's men caught up with me 3 days ago. Whatever the truth is, it got Marcus killed, and now they're coming for the gold, and anyone who knows about it." The night deepened around them, the cabin suddenly feeling very small and exposed on the vast, empty plain. Eleanor studied the document again, her mind working through the implications. "There's something you're not telling me," she said finally. Gabriel nodded, the admission costing him visibly. "There is, but right now the less you know, the safer you'll be." Eleanor laughed, a short, bitter sound. "I think we're well past safe, Mr. Winters." Outside, a night bird called, then fell silent. The wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of rain, the first in months. Eleanor felt the weight of choices, narrowing of paths, converging toward an inevitable confrontation. "How many men does Blackwood have?" At least 5 that I've seen. Probably more. And when will they come? Oh, soon, within days. Gabriel's gaze was steady. You should leave, Mrs. Reed. This isn't your fight. Eleanor looked around the cabin, at the table Michael had built with his own hands, at the quilt her mother had made for their wedding, at the certificate that represented years of backbreaking labor and stubborn hope. This is my home, she said simply, and apparently it's worth fighting for in more ways than I realized. She crossed to the fireplace and removed a loose brick from the chimney. From the hidden space, she extracted a small oilskin package. Unwrapping it revealed a Colt Navy revolver, well-maintained despite its age. Michael's, she explained, checking the chambers with practiced ease. He taught me to use it before he taught me to plow. Gabriel watched her reassessment evident in his eyes. You're full of surprises, Mrs. Reed. Eleanor, she corrected, if we're going to fight together, you might as well use my name. The following morning brought no respite from tension, but it did bring clarity of purpose. While Gabriel's wounds still limited his movement, his mind was sharp, strategic. Together, they assessed the ranch's defensibility, identifying weaknesses and advantages. The barn was vulnerable, too far from the cabin for effective coverage. The well sat exposed in the yard. The ridge to the east offered a perfect vantage point for anyone watching the property. We need to prepare as if they'll come at night, Gabriel said as they walked the perimeter. Blackwood prefers to avoid witnesses. Eleanor nodded, mentally cataloging supplies and ammunition. How long can your horses go without water? A day, maybe 2. Why? I'm thinking we move them to the hidden spring in the north pasture. Keep them out of sight along with most of the gold. Gabriel considered this, then agreed. Good thinking. We'll keep 1 pack here. Make it look like that's all there is if they search the place. As they worked through the day, a strange companionship developed between them. Gabriel helped repair the broken latch on the barn door, his movements betraying a craftsman's precision despite his injury. Eleanor showed him the defensive improvements Michael had made to the cabin, the reinforced shutters, the narrow gun ports disguised as decorative carvings. By midday, they had moved the horses and most of the gold to the secluded spring. As they were returning to the ranch, Gabriel suddenly stiffened, his eyes fixed on something in the distance. What is it? Eleanor asked, following his gaze. There, he pointed to what appeared to be an ordinary rock formation on the hillside. That wasn't there yesterday. Eleanor squinted against the sun. I don't see anything unusual. Exactly, it's too perfect. Gabriel's voice dropped. Someone's watching us. Has been since we left the spring. They continued toward the cabin, their conversation shifting to mundane topics for the benefit of unseen observers. Once inside, Gabriel moved to the window, carefully scanning the terrain. We need to know exactly what we're up against, he said. I'm going to draw them out, make them show their hand. Eleanor frowned. How? I'll ride into Redemption tomorrow. Let myself be seen. They'll think I'm either running or looking for help. That's suicide. Gabriel shook his head. It's reconnaissance, and it might buy us time to prepare. Eleanor wanted to argue, but recognized the logic in his plan. And what do I do while you're playing target? Gabriel moved to the table where they'd spread out their limited arsenal. You practice. If it comes to a fight, I need to know you can hit what you aim at. For the next hour, Gabriel drilled Eleanor on loading, firing, and reloading the rifle and revolver. Her skill impressed him. Michael had been a thorough teacher, but Gabriel pushed her further, insisting she practice until the movements became automatic. Don't think, he instructed as she sighted along the rifle barrel at a target he'd set up in the yard. Just breathe, see the target, and squeeze. The rifle cracked, and the can at 80 yards jumped into the air. Eleanor allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. Again, Gabriel said, unmoved by her success, until you can do it with your eyes half closed and your hand numb with cold. As dusk approached, they retreated to the cabin and the relative security of its walls. Gabriel settled in a chair by the window, his revolver within easy reach. Eleanor busied herself preparing a simple meal, the familiar routine a welcome distraction from the looming threat. Tell me about Michael, Gabriel said unexpectedly. Eleanor's hands stilled over the pot she was stirring. Wipe out, because knowing what you're fighting for makes you fight smarter. She considered this, then nodded. He was a cartographer in the war, mapped terrain for Union advances. That's how we ended up here. He'd seen the land during his service, knew its potential. The 54th Massachusetts, Gabriel noted, glancing at the framed commendation. That was a colored regiment. Yes, Michael was their map maker, but he fought alongside them at Fort Wagner. Pride colored her voice. He believed in what they were fighting for: equality, justice. Did he ever mention a special fund? Gabriel asked, his tone carefully neutral. Something set up by the Lincoln administration. Eleanor frowned. Not that I recall. Why, Gabriel seemed about to answer when a floorboard creaked, not from their movement, but from beneath the cabin. Both froze, listening intently. The root cellar, Eleanor whispered. Gabriel was on his feet instantly, revolver drawn. He moved silently to the trap door in the floor, positioned himself, then yanked it open in one swift motion. A startled yelp echoed from below, followed by the sound of scrabbling movement. Gabriel reached down and hauled up a thin, dirty figure. A boy no more than 12 years old. Please don't shoot me, mister, the boy gasped, eyes wide with terror. Eleanor recognized him immediately. Tommy! Tommy Freeman! What on earth are you doing under my floor? The boy's eyes darted between them. Ma sent me, said to warn you. Men been asking about the ranch in town. Mean-looking men with guns. Gabriel lowered his weapon but maintained his grip on the boy's collar. What men? How many? 4 that I seen, led by a big fella with a scar down his face. Called himself Colonel something. Gabriel and Eleanor exchanged glances. Blackwood, they said in unison. They've been asking if anyone new's come through. Tommy continued, slightly calmer now that he wasn't staring down a gun barrel. Offering money for information. And what did people tell them? Eleanor asked. Tommy shrugged. Not much. Folks in Redemption don't much care for outsiders asking questions. Especially not the kind that wear city clothes, but carry guns like they know how to use them. Gabriel finally released the boy. How'd you get here without being seen? A flash of pride crossed Tommy's face. Creek bed's dry enough to walk through, comes up behind your north pasture. Ma says my pa used it during the war when the slave catchers came through. Eleanor nodded, understanding. Sarah Freeman, Tommy's mother, was a freed slave who'd established a small but thriving farm at the edge of the territory. She and Eleanor had formed a quiet alliance in a region where both women were viewed as anomalies. Your mother's a wise woman, Eleanor said. Thank her for the warning. She said to tell you something else, Tommy added, his brow furrowing with concentration. Said to tell you, Caleb's station is ready if needed. She said you'd understand. Eleanor didn't understand, but she saw recognition flash in Gabriel's eyes. Thank you, Tommy, she said, retrieving a small bundle of cornbread from the cupboard and pressing it into the boy's hands. Get home safe now. Use that creek bed both ways. After the boy had gone, Eleanor turned to Gabriel. What's Caleb's station? Gabriel was already checking his weapons, a new urgency in his movements. Not what, who. Caleb was a conductor on the Underground Railroad. If Sarah's using that name, she's offering a safe house, a place to hide if things go wrong. How would you know that, and how would Sarah? Gabriel met her gaze directly. Because the gold in those saddlebags isn't what Blackwood thinks it is. It was never meant for the war effort. He moved to the fireplace and carefully lifted the framed commendation from the wall. Turning it over, he worked at the backing until it came loose, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a folded map. I suspected Michael might have been involved when I saw this regiment citation, Gabriel explained. The 54th wasn't just any unit. Many of its officers were abolitionists with connections to the railroad. Eleanor stared at the map he unfolded on the table. It showed the territory in detail she'd never seen, with markings and symbols she didn't recognize. What is this, a freedom map? Gabriel said softly. Routes and safe houses for escaped slaves, but this one was made after the war ended, after the Emancipation Proclamation. I don't understand. Why would they need escape routes after emancipation? Because freedom on paper isn't the same as freedom in reality, especially when it comes to land. Gabriel traced a road on the map with his finger. This was for freedmen trying to claim land under the Homestead Act, land they were legally entitled to, but often prevented from claiming by violence or legal manipulation. Eleanor's mind was racing, connecting disparate pieces of information. And the gold. Gabriel took a deep breath. It was a secret fund established by Lincoln in the final months of the war, money set aside to help former slaves establish homesteads and to provide the capital they needed for tools, seed, livestock, everything necessary to turn raw land into a productive farm. How do you know this? Because Marcus told me, before he died. Gabriel's voice tightened with emotion. He was part of a network of agents ensuring the fund reached its intended recipients. When he discovered Blackwood was using railroad surveys to identify and seize land meant for freedmen, homesteaders, he started investigating and found proof Blackwood was forging homestead certificates, Eleanor finished, just like Harding threatened to do with mine. Gabriel nodded. Blackwood and his associates have been systematically dispossessing legitimate homesteaders, especially widows and freedmen, along the proposed railroad route. The land goes to shell companies that later sell to the railroad at enormous profit. But what does this have to do with the gold? Why would Blackwood care about a fund for freedmen? Because he stole it, Gabriel said flatly. After Lincoln's assassination, Blackwood was one of the officers assigned to oversee the transition of certain sensitive financial matters. He diverted the fund, reported it stolen by deserters, and has been using it to finance his land-grabbing operation. Eleanor sat heavily in a chair, the magnitude of the conspiracy overwhelming. And Michael, did he know about this? A shadow crossed Gabriel's face. I believe he did. The map in his commendation frame suggests he was part of the same network as Marcus, which means his death wasn't an accident. Eleanor whispered the truth she'd suspected, finally spoken aloud. Gabriel couldn't meet her eyes. I think Blackwood killed him to prevent him from exposing the scheme, just like he killed Marcus. A heavy silence fell between them, broken only by the distant howl of a coyote. Eleanor felt a strange calm settle over her, the kind that comes after long-held suspicions are finally confirmed. Tomorrow, she said at last, we don't just prepare for a fight. We prepare to expose the truth. Gabriel looked at her with newfound respect. It won't be easy. Blackwood has connections, influence. So do I, Eleanor replied, thinking of Sarah Freeman and the network she represented. More than anyone realizes. As night deepened around the small cabin, they bent over the map together, plotting not just their defense, but their counterattack. The gold, Lincoln's gold, had found its way back to its intended purpose. And Eleanor Reed, once simply fighting to keep a promise to her husband, now found herself at the center of a battle for justice that extended far beyond her 160 acres. The land devours the weak, she thought, running her fingers over the map's weathered surface. But it also reveals the strong. Sarah stands frozen in the doorway, staring at the ghost that can't possibly be her brother. Michael Mackenzie moves into the lamplight, his features sharpening into painful familiarity. The scar along his jawline is new, as is the hardness in his eyes, but there's no mistaking him. The brother she mourned, the hero she idolized, stands before her. Flesh and blood, not memory. I died at Chattanooga, according to the official record. But some men are more valuable to their country dead than alive. Sarah feels the world contract around her memories, colliding with this impossible reality. Sunday dinners with an empty chair. Her mother's tears on Memorial Day. Her father's pained silence whenever Michael's name was mentioned. You let us believe, you let Mama suffer. Michael's expression remains controlled, revealing little of the turmoil beneath. Choices had to be made, Sarah. Painful ones. After what Father and I discovered, there was no going back to normal life. Eleanor's voice breaks through the tension, a mother's cry of recognition that transcends reason. Michael, my boy. She rushes forward, her bonds barely removed, collapsing into her son's arms. Michael's controlled facade cracks slightly as he embraces his mother, eyes closing briefly against emotions too powerful to name. Robert Mackenzie watches from his position against the wall, blood seeping through his fingers as he clutches his wound. His voice comes weak but clear. It was the only way to protect you both. To protect the evidence. Caldwell, Beauregard, surveys the family reunion with cold calculation. How touching. The prodigal son returns. I assume you're responsible for removing the documents from the war chamber. Michael releases his mother, positioning himself protectively between her and Caldwell. They're secure, and they'll remain that way until we determine how to proceed. Sheriff Daniels keeps his revolver trained on Caldwell's men. I've got deputies surrounding the property. This ends tonight, one way or another. Beauregard's laugh holds no humor. You're outnumbered, Sheriff. My men control the perimeter. Your deputies, if they exist at all, are likely already disarmed. A rifle shot cracks outside, followed by another. Then silence. Beauregard smiles thinly. As I suspected. The momentary distraction is all Wilson needs. Despite his shoulder wound, he lunges toward his fallen rifle. Sarah swings Matthew's revolver toward him, but Beauregard uses the movement to draw a hidden derringer from his sleeve. Enough Beauregard's voice cuts through the chaos. The small pistol in his hand is aimed at Eleanor. One more move from any of you, and Mrs. Mackenzie joins her husband in critical condition. Sarah freezes the revolver half raised. Wilson retrieves his rifle, aiming it at Matthew despite his bleeding shoulder. Very good. Beauregard nods approval. Now, Mr. Hawkins, or should I call you Thornton, you will tell me exactly where you've hidden those documents, or I'll execute this family one by one. Matthew's face remains impassive. Kill them and you'll never find what you're looking for. The sound of horses approaching interrupts the standoff, many horses moving at speed. Wilson moves to the window, peering cautiously through the curtains. Riders coming. At least a dozen. Not ours. Beauregard's composure slips momentarily. Check again. Our reinforcements were due from Helena. They're flying federal marshal badges. Wilson reports tension evident in his voice. And they're surrounding the house. A voice booms from outside, amplified by a speaking trumpet. This is U.S. Marshal James Burton. The house is surrounded by federal agents. Lay down your weapons and come out with your hands raised. Beauregard processes this new development with remarkable speed, his mind recalculating options. He turns to Michael. You brought the marshals. Clever, but not clever enough. In one fluid motion, Beauregard grabs Eleanor, pressing the derringer to her temple. We're leaving. Anyone tries to stop us, she dies first. Sarah's grip tightens on her revolver. Let her go. Robert struggles to rise, his face contorted with pain and rage. Beauregard, this is between us. Let my wife go. You're in no position to negotiate, Mackenzie. Beauregard backs toward the kitchen, dragging Eleanor with him. Wilson, cover our retreat. Kill anyone who moves. The marshal's voice calls again from outside. You have 30 seconds to surrender before we enter the premises. Wilson glances nervously between his boss and the windows. Sir, we're outgunned. Follow orders. Wilson. Beauregard snaps, disappearing into the kitchen with Eleanor. Wilson raises his rifle, aiming first at Robert, then at Sarah, indecision clear on his face. The odds of survival diminishing with each passing second. Outside, the marshals begin a countdown. 20 seconds. Michael steps forward, hands raised non-threateningly. He'll kill her the moment they're clear. You know that, Wilson. There's no scenario where this ends well for you. Wilson's rifle barrel wavers slightly. Shut up, 10 seconds. Sarah watches Wilson's trigger finger tighten, his eyes wild with fear and desperation. At this range, he can't miss. She meets Matthew's gaze across the room, something unspoken passing between them. 5 seconds, the front door bursts open. Wilson spins, firing reflexively. The bullet strikes wood. Its federal marshals pour through both entrances, weapons drawn. Wilson is tackled to the ground, his rifle clattering across the floorboards. Sarah doesn't wait. She races for the kitchen, Matthew limping rapidly behind her. They find the back door standing open, cool night air flowing in. No sign of Beauregard or Eleanor. He's taking her to the tunnels, Matthew says, grimacing as he puts weight on his injured leg. There's another entrance behind the woodshed. Sarah hesitates, torn between pursuing her mother and tending to her wounded father. A marshal appears in the kitchen doorway, calling for a doctor as colleagues secure the house. Go! Michael calls from the front room, kneeling beside their father. I'll take care of Papa. Find Mama Sarah, and Matthew slip out the back door into the darkness, moving swiftly toward the woodshed. The yard is chaos. Marshals securing Beauregard's men lanterns, casting wild shadows across the familiar landscape of Sarah's childhood. Nothing feels real anymore. Not the brother returned from the dead, not the cigarette war beneath their feet, not the mother taken by a man willing to kill for secrets 30 years buried. They reach the woodshed, finding the door ajar. Matthew pulls a small revolver from his boot, a backup weapon Sarah hadn't noticed before. There's a trap door under the woodpile, he explains, moving stacked logs with his free hand. They can't have much of a head start. Sarah helps clear the woodpile, revealing rough floorboards beneath. A metal ring lies flush against one board, a handle similar to the one in the barn. She pulls it open, revealing a dark passage below. No ladder this time, Matthew observes. It's about a 6-foot drop. I'll go first. Despite his injury, Matthew lowers himself into the darkness with controlled precision, landing with a muffled grunt. All clear. Hand me the lantern, then jump. I'll catch you. Sarah passes down the lantern she's grabbed from a hook on the woodshed wall, then lowers herself into the hole. Matthew's hands find her way, steadying her landing in the close confines of the tunnel. The air here is different from the barn passage, damper, cooler with the mineral scent of deep earth. Matthew lights the lantern, revealing a tunnel that looks far older than the others, its walls reinforced with timbers darkened by age. This is part of the original network, Matthew explains, leading the way forward. Built during the war, not after. For what purpose? Sarah asks, ducking under a low-hanging beam. Escape routes primarily. Communication lines between Union safe houses. Some were used to move sensitive documents and prisoners. Your father would know more than you do. Sarah absorbs this, connecting pieces of her family history that never made sense before. Papa's nightmares. His insistence on teaching her survival skills. His strange comfort in the underground root cellar during storms. Did your father build these tunnels? She asks. Matthew pauses at a junction, considering their direction. General Hawkins oversaw their construction? Yes, with your father's help. They were part of a special intelligence unit that operated behind Confederate lines. They take the right-hand passage, moving deeper into the earth. The tunnel slopes downward, the air growing colder with each step. These tunnels saved many lives during the war, Matthew continues. Ironic that they might now facilitate the rebirth of the very cause they were built to defeat. What do you mean Beauregard and his allies want more than just to suppress evidence of the Lincoln conspiracy? They're using the old tunnel network to build something new, a shadow infrastructure across the Western territories. Railway lines that can quickly become military transport, telegraph stations that can be converted to command centers, all hidden beneath legitimate business operations. Sarah tries to grasp the scale of what Matthew describes, a network spanning multiple states built in secret over decades, waiting for the moment to emerge. They're planning another civil war, she asks, her voice echoing slightly in the narrow passage. Matthew's expression is grim in the lantern light. They call it the Reclamation. Not a war of North against South this time, but of their vision of America against what they see as corruption and weakness. They've been placing men in key government positions, military commands, industrial concerns, waiting for the right moment. The passage widens into a small chamber with 3 branching tunnels. Matthew holds the lantern higher, examining marks carved into the support beams. Symbols that mean nothing to Sarah. This way, he says, choosing the middle passage. If Beauregard is heading for the main chamber, this is the fastest route. They move more quickly now, the tunnel widening enough to walk upright. Sarah keeps her revolver ready, listening for any sound ahead that might indicate her mother and Beauregard. The tension grows as they progress, the silence becoming oppressive. No footsteps, no voices, nothing but the sound of their own breathing and the occasional drip of water from the ceiling. Then, distant but unmistakable, a woman's cry cuts through the subterranean quiet. Mama Sarah lurches forward, but Matthew catches her arm. Wait, we need to be smart about this. Beauregard is expecting pursuit. He'll have the advantage if we rush in blindly. Sarah pulls against his restraining hand. She's my mother, and we'll save her. Matthew promises, but getting ourselves killed won't help her. Listen. They fall silent, straining to hear. Voices drift from ahead. Beauregard's cultured tones, Eleanor's responses too faint to make out. They're alive, still talking. That gives us time. Matthew extinguishes the lantern, plunging them into darkness. Sarah feels momentary panic as the blackness envelops them, but forces herself to breathe steadily. There's another approach to the main chamber, Matthew whispers, a maintenance shaft that comes in from above. Hawkins showed it to me in his journals. Beauregard may not know about it. Lead the way, Sarah replies, her voice steadier than she feels. They backtrack to the chamber with 3 passages, taking the leftmost tunnel this time. It narrows quickly, forcing them to crouch, then crawl. The absolute darkness is disorienting, but Matthew moves with confidence, leading Sarah through turns she would never have found alone. The passage begins to slope upward, the earth giving way to stone. They climb steadily for what seems like eternity, Sarah's hands finding natural handholds in the rock. Finally, Matthew stops. We're directly above the main chamber, he whispers. There's a grate here that allows observation from above. If we're lucky, we can see them without being seen. Sarah feels Matthew's hands working at something in the darkness. A faint sliver of light appears as he carefully slides back a metal panel. He positions himself to look through, then makes space for Sarah. She peers through the narrow opening into the chamber below. The war room she saw earlier has been transformed. Many of the crates are open, their contents spread across tables. Maps and documents are being sorted by two men in suits, Beauregard's reinforcements who must have arrived earlier. Eleanor sits bound to a chair in the center of the room, her expression defiant despite her situation. Beauregard paces before her, the derringer still in his hand. "You're making a terrible mistake," Eleanor says, her voice clearer now. "These documents won't give you what you want. They'll only expose crimes long buried." Beauregard stops his pacing. "The crimes, Mrs. Mackenzie, depend entirely on who writes the history. Today's treason is tomorrow's patriotism when the victors change." One of the men sorting documents calls out, "Sir, we're missing the Surratt testimonials and the Treasury Department correspondence." Beauregard's expression darkens. "They have to be here. Search everything again." "They're not here," Eleanor states flatly, "and you'll never find them." Beauregard turns to her, his composure slipping. "Where are they? What has your son done with them?" Eleanor's laugh holds no humor. "Which son? Mr. Beauregard, the one you thought was dead, or the one you've been hunting?" Beauregard steps closer, menace in every line of his body. "Don't test me. Mrs. Mackenzie, I've shown remarkable restraint thus far, but my patience has limits." "So does mine," Eleanor replies calmly. "You should know that my husband and I prepared for this day. We knew someone would eventually come for the documents, for the truth. You're not the first, and you won't be the last." Sarah feels a surge of pride at her mother's courage, mixed with fear for her safety. Above them, boots scrape on stone as more men enter the chamber from another tunnel. "Sir," a new voice reports, "the marshals have secured the farm. Wilson and the others have been arrested." Beauregard absorbs this news with a tightening of his jaw. "And our men scattered. Some captured, some escaped into the hills. We have horses waiting at the eastern exit, but we need to move soon." "What about the documents?" Beauregard demands. "Have you found anything?" The man hesitates. "Nothing critical, sir. Basic maps supply lists, but none of the evidence you described." Beauregard turns back to Eleanor, rage building behind his controlled exterior. "Your son has the Surratt evidence, doesn't he? He's removed it from the tunnels entirely." Eleanor's silence is confirmation enough. "How long have you been working with him?" Beauregard presses. "How long has Michael Mackenzie been alive and plotting against us?" "That's the wrong question," Eleanor replies. "The right question is, how many others know the truth now? How many copies of those documents exist? How many judges, newspaper editors, and senators received packages this week?" Beauregard's composure finally breaks. He strikes Eleanor across the face, the blow echoing in the chamber. Sarah flinches, instinctively raising her revolver toward the grate before Matthew's hand stops her. "Not yet," he mouths silently. "We're outnumbered." Below, Beauregard regains control, straightening his jacket as Eleanor glares up at him, a trickle of blood at the corner of her mouth. "It seems we need to accelerate our plans," Beauregard announces to his men. "Gather what documents remain. Prepare the charges." "Charges?" Eleanor's voice sharpens with alarm. "What are you doing?" "Erasing evidence, Mrs. Mackenzie. These tunnels have served their purpose. Now they'll become a tomb for secrets." "And for you." Sarah's blood runs cold as one of the men opens a crate revealing sticks of dynamite nestled in straw. "They're going to collapse the tunnels with her mother inside." "We need to act," she whispers urgently. Now Matthew surveys the room below, counting. 4 men besides Beauregard, all armed. "We'll only get one chance." He pulls back from the grate, outlines his plan in hurried whispers. The grate isn't designed to be opened, but the metal has corroded over decades of disuse. With enough force, they might be able to break through, dropping directly into the chamber. The element of surprise would give them a momentary advantage, but only momentary. "I'll go first," Matthew concludes. "When I drop, aim for the man nearest the dynamite. Don't hesitate." Sarah nods, positioning herself as Matthew braces against the grate, testing its strength. It gives slightly under pressure. "Ready," he mouths. Sarah raises the revolver, sighting along the barrel toward the chamber below. "Ready." Matthew throws his weight against the grate. Metal groans but holds. He repositions, tries again with shoulder and good leg combined. The ancient bolts begin to give way. One more push, the grate tears free with a screech of protesting metal. Matthew plunges through the opening, landing atop one of Beauregard's men. Sarah follows immediately, the revolver tracking toward the man with the dynamite. She fires once, the bullet striking his arm. He drops the explosives with a cry of pain. Beauregard reacts with military precision, dragging Eleanor's chair backward while drawing his derringer. The remaining men scramble for weapons as Matthew grapples with his opponent on the floor. "Drop your weapons," Sarah commands, her revolver now aimed at Beauregard, "or the next bullet goes through your head." For a moment, the tableau holds. Sarah standing amid fallen metal, revolver steady, Matthew pinning his opponent, Beauregard using Eleanor as a shield, the wounded man clutching his bleeding arm, two others with hands hovering near holstered pistols. Then Beauregard laughs. "Miss Mackenzie, how determined you are to save your family. I almost admire it." "Let her go." Sarah repeats, the revolver unwavering. "I think not." Beauregard presses the derringer against Eleanor's temple. "You have one bullet left in that revolver." "I can see the cylinder from here. One bullet, 4 targets." "Poor odds, wouldn't you agree?" Sarah feels sweat beading on her forehead, the weight of the revolver growing in her hand. How could he know she had fired 5 times already? Then she remembers. The confrontation at the house. He was counting. Matthew rises slowly from his subdued opponent, hands raised as the other men draw their weapons. "It's over, Beauregard. The evidence is beyond your reach. The marshals are securing the tunnels as we speak." Beauregard's smile is cold. "Then we have nothing to lose, do we?" His focus returns to Sarah. "Lower your weapon, Miss Mackenzie, or watch your mother die." "I won't ask twice." Sarah's mind races through options, finding none that end well. She meets her mother's eyes, sees the imperceptible shake of Eleanor's head. "Don't do it." Time slows as Sarah weighs impossible choices. One bullet, 4 armed men, her mother's life hanging by the thinnest thread. A sound interrupts the standoff, footsteps approaching from one of the tunnels. Everyone tenses, weapons shifting toward the new threat. Michael Mackenzie steps into the chamber, hands raised, unarmed. "Beauregard, it's over. The marshals are right behind me. Surrender now and you might avoid the gallows." Beauregard's expression hardens. Michael Mackenzie, the ghost who wouldn't stay dead. How appropriate that you should join us for the final act. "The final act belongs to justice, not conspiracy," Michael replies, moving slowly into the chamber. "The evidence is secure. Multiple copies have been distributed to trusted individuals across the country. Kill us if you wish, but you can't kill the truth anymore." "The truth," Beauregard laughs bitterly. "What truth would that be?" "The convenient narrative that exonerates your father while condemning mine. The story that makes traitors into heroes and patriots into villains." Sarah watches confusion cross Michael's face. "What are you talking about?" "He doesn't know," Eleanor realizes aloud. "Robert never told him. Told me what Michael demands, stopping his advance." Beauregard studies Michael with newfound interest. How fascinating. The dutiful son carrying on his father's mission without understanding its true purpose. "Tell me, Mr. Mackenzie, what exactly do you think those documents prove?" "They prove that Lincoln's assassination was orchestrated by Confederate sympathizers within his own government," Michael states firmly. "Men who feared his plans for reconciliation would be too lenient toward the defeated South." Beauregard's laugh echoes against stone walls. "Is that what your father told you?" What a convenient reversal. "What do you mean?" Sarah interjects, the revolver still raised, but her attention divided now between Beauregard and this new mystery. "Ask your father, Miss Mackenzie. Ask him who really conspired to kill Abraham Lincoln. Ask him why General Hawkins was murdered, and by whom." "You're lying," Michael accuses, but doubt has crept into his voice. "Am I?" Beauregard's smile is triumphant now. "The documents you've been protecting tell a very different story than the one you believe. Lincoln wasn't killed because his plans were too lenient toward the South. He was killed because he discovered a conspiracy among his own generals, Union generals including your precious Hawkins, to extend the war for profit and power." "It's not true," Eleanor insists, struggling against her bonds. "Robert would never." "Would never," what Beauregard interrupts. "Participate in war profiteering, cover up the murder of civilians, or just conceal his role in eliminating those who threaten to expose him. The chamber falls silent as the accusations hang in the air. Sarah's mind reels, trying to reconcile Beauregard's claims with everything she's been told. Could her father, the man who taught her honor and integrity, have been complicit in such crimes? Matthew breaks the silence. Whatever the truth, it doesn't justify your actions now. Beauregard, the reclamation is treason, plain and simple. Beauregard's expression hardens. The reclamation is the only hope for an America drowning in corruption and weakness. We're merely finishing what our fathers started, building a nation governed by strength and order, not compromise and decay. The distant sound of voices echoes from one of the tunnels, marshals approaching rapidly. Beauregard glances toward the sound calculation evident in his eyes. It seems our time grows short, he says. A pity. I'd hoped to convince you of the righteousness of our cause. Instead, we'll have to rely on more primitive methods. In one swift motion, Beauregard shoves Eleanor forward, lunging toward the fallen dynamite. His men open fire bullets ricocheting off stone walls. Sarah dives behind a table as Matthew pulls Eleanor to safety behind a stack of crates. Michael takes cover near the tunnel entrance, shouting for the approaching marshals to hurry. Beauregard reaches the dynamite, snatching a stick and a blasting cap from the scattered box. "Stop him!" Matthew yells, breaking cover to tackle one of Beauregard's men. Sarah aims her revolver at Beauregard, knowing she has only one bullet remaining. He works quickly, inserting the blasting cap into the dynamite stick. One of his men provides covering fire, forcing Sarah back behind the table. Beauregard strikes a match, lighting the fuse. The flame sizzles to life, burning rapidly toward the blasting cap. He hurls the dynamite toward the main support column of the chamber. Sarah fires her final bullet not at Beauregard, but at the dynamite stick, arcing through the air. The shot is nearly impossible. A moving target, poor light, extreme pressure. The bullet misses the dynamite by inches, striking stone instead. The dynamite lands near the central column fuse, burning inexorably shorter. Michael breaks from cover, sprinting toward it in a desperate bid to extinguish the fuse or throw it away from the critical support. Beauregard seizes the moment of chaos to flee toward one of the side tunnels, shouting for his men to follow. Two comply immediately, while the third continues exchanging fire with Matthew. Marshals pour into the chamber from the main tunnel, weapons drawn. Seeing the burning fuse, they shout warnings, urging everyone to evacuate. Michael reaches the dynamite, grabs it with bare hands, and hurls it down the empty tunnel Beauregard had just fled through. "Get down," he screams, throwing himself over Eleanor as everyone dives for cover. The explosion rocks the chamber, dust and debris cascading from the ceiling. Stone cracks timbers, splinter, but the main supports hold. The damage is contained to the side tunnel, now completely collapsed. When the dust settles, Sarah raises her head to find the chamber in chaos. Marshals secure the remaining gunmen, while others check for injuries. Michael helps Eleanor to her feet, both covered in dust, but largely unharmed. Matthew limps towards Sarah, his injured leg worse after the combat. Beauregard, she asks, already knowing the answer. "Gone," Matthew confirms grimly. "That tunnel connects to the eastern exit. If he had horses waiting, he'll be miles away by now." Michael finishes approaching them. But without the documents, without his network intact, he's just a fugitive. A dangerous fugitive, Matthew amends, with powerful allies still in place. The lead marshal joins them, introducing himself as Burton. "We need to evacuate immediately. That explosion compromised the structural integrity of this whole section. Engineers will need to assess before anyone returns." "What about the documents?" Sarah asks, looking around at the scattered papers and maps. "The evidence," Burton gestures to his men, who are already carefully gathering materials into secure cases. "We'll take everything for analysis. If what Mr. Mackenzie told us is true, this could be the biggest conspiracy case since the war itself." As they prepare to leave, Sarah pulls Michael aside. "Papa," she asks simply, "stable for now?" Michael replies, "The doctor was with him when I left. The bullet missed vital organs, but he's lost a lot of blood. He's asking for you." "And for you," Sarah studies her brother's face, seeing the conflict there. Michael's expression darkens. "I'm not sure I'm ready for that conversation. Not after what Beauregard said." "Do you believe him?" Sarah asked quietly. "About Papa's involvement in Lincoln's assassination? About General Hawkins?" "I don't know what to believe anymore," Michael admits. "The documents I secured don't match Beauregard's version of events, but they're incomplete. I always wondered why Father was so reluctant to make them public even decades later." Now I have to consider that he might have been protecting himself, not just the country. Matthew joins them, having overheard the exchange. My father died because he discovered something that powerful men wanted kept secret, he says. I've spent my life believing those men were Confederate sympathizers. But what if it was the other way around, Sarah finishes. What if Union generals, including Papa, were the real conspirators? The possibility hangs between them like a physical weight. If true, it would mean that everything they've believed about their family, about the war, about American history itself has been built on carefully constructed lies. The marshals begin moving toward the exit, urging them to follow. As they navigate the tunnels back toward the surface, Sarah's mind races with questions that have no easy answers. Who was her father really? What role did he play in the shadows of history? And what would they find in the complete documents if they ever surfaced? They emerge from the tunnels into the cool night air. The Mackenzie farm transformed by the presence of federal marshals and their equipment. Lanterns illuminate the yard as agents secure prisoners and evidence. Medical personnel tend to the wounded, including Robert Mackenzie, now lying on a stretcher near the house. Sarah rushes to her father's side, taking his hand. Papa. His skin is cool and pale, his breathing labored, but his eyes focus on her face with recognition and relief. Sarah. You're safe. His voice is barely audible. Your mother, she's right here, Sarah assures him as Eleanor kneels beside them, tears streaming down her dust-covered face. She takes Robert's other hand, pressing it to her cheek. Robert's eyes move past them, finding Michael standing a few paces away, uncertainty written across his features. Son, he whispers. Come. Michael approaches slowly, conflicting emotions battling across his face. The joy of reunion mingled with new doubts about the man he's served so faithfully. You need to tell them, Robert says, each word an effort. All of it. No more secrets. Michael kneels beside his father, voice low and urgent. What Beauregard said about you, about Hawkins, about Lincoln. Is it true? Robert's eyes close briefly, pain crossing his features, that has nothing to do with his physical wound. Not as he told it, not entirely. But there is truth there buried beneath lies. Then tell us, Michael presses, while you still can. Robert's gaze moves to Matthew, who stands apart from the family circle, watching with unreadable eyes. Hawkins, boy, he says, you deserve the truth more than anyone. Come closer. Matthew hesitates, then limps forward, kneeling opposite Michael. I've spent my life trying to vindicate my father, he says, to prove he was a hero, not a traitor, as some claimed. He was both, Robert replies, his voice growing weaker. As was I, as were many of us who saw too much, did too much in those dark days. Eleanor squeezes her husband's hand. Robert, you don't have to do this now. You need to save your strength. No more time, Robert insists. They need to understand. Before Beauregard twists the truth beyond recognition. Marshal Burton approaches respectfully, keeping some distance. Mr. Mackenzie, the doctor says you shouldn't be talking. We have an ambulance wagon ready to transport you to Helena. Robert ignores him, focusing on the faces surrounding him, his family and the son of his oldest friend and greatest regret. In the final months of the war, he begins, voice fading but determined. Lincoln discovered something. Not a Confederate plot, but a Union one. Generals and politicians who had grown rich from the conflict, who didn't want it to end. They'd been extending the war, deliberately sabotaging peace initiatives, inflating casualties, and supply needs to justify more government contracts. Sarah feels her understanding of history shifting beneath her like sand in an hourglass. The noble cause she'd been taught since childhood suddenly revealing darker, more complex truths. Lincoln was preparing to expose them after the surrender, Robert continues. To clean house completely. Hawkins and I were tasked with gathering evidence, building an irrefutable case. We had documents, testimonies, financial records, enough to bring down some of the most powerful men in Washington. And they killed him for it, Matthew concludes. The assassination wasn't Confederate revenge. It was a preemptive strike by corrupt Union officials. Robert nods weakly. They used Booth and his Confederate sympathies as cover, as distraction. The perfect patsy. Afterward, they fabricated the wider conspiracy, executed innocent people like Surratt, and buried the real plot beneath layers of false history. Michael's expression hardens. And you've known this all along. You let history remember Lincoln's killers as Confederate sympathizers when you knew the truth. We tried to expose it. Robert's voice cracks with emotion. Hawkins insisted on going public immediately. I urged caution, argued that the country was too fragile after the war, that the truth would tear apart what remained of national unity. While we debated, they moved against us. Matthew leans forward. They killed my father. Robert's eyes fill with tears. I was supposed to meet him that night, to guard the documents. I was late, delayed by a military checkpoint that shouldn't have been there. When I arrived, Hawkins was already dying. He told me to hide the evidence to keep it safe until the right time came to reveal it. And you decided that time would never come, Michael accuses. You buried the truth along with the documents. I thought I was protecting the country, Robert whispers, then protecting our family when they started hunting anyone connected to Hawkins. I changed our name, bought this remote property because of the old tunnel access, and tried to build a new life. But the past never stays buried, does it? The doctor approaches again, more insistent. Sir, we need to transport you immediately. Your condition is deteriorating. Robert ignores him, focusing on his family with desperate intensity. The complete documents are hidden in a lockbox, behind the false wall in the root cellar. The combination is Sarah's birthday. Everything is there, the full truth, not just about Lincoln, but about everything that followed. The corruption that never ended just changed form. What Beauregard calls the reclamation is just the latest chapter in a power struggle that's been going on for decades. Marshal Burton steps forward. Mr. Mackenzie, these allegations, if they can be substantiated, they can, Robert confirms. Names, dates, bank transfers, meeting minutes. Enough to rewrite history books. Enough to destroy reputations built on lies. Enough to tear this country apart if handled carelessly. The doctor signals to assistants, who move forward with the stretcher. We're moving him now. Family can ride in the ambulance wagon. As they lift Robert, he grips Michael's arm with surprising strength. I made mistakes, terrible ones. But everything I did, everything, was to protect this family and this country. Remember that when you read the full record. They carry Robert toward the waiting wagon, Eleanor following close behind. Sarah turns to Michael and Matthew, the three of them standing in the lantern light, connected by secrets and blood and the weight of a history larger than themselves. We need to find that lockbox, Michael says, before anyone else does. Matthew nods agreement. If what your father says is true, those documents are more dangerous than any weapon. In the wrong hands, or the right ones, Sarah counters. Isn't truth what we've been fighting for? What men have died for, Michael's expression is troubled. Truth is seldom simple, Sarah, especially when it contradicts everything people believe about their history, their heroes, their nation's foundation myths. Marshal Burton approaches them, his expression grave. I couldn't help overhearing. These documents your father mentioned. The government will need to secure them immediately. Matthew steps forward. With all due respect, Marshal, until we determine exactly who in the government might be compromised by these revelations, the documents stay with us. Burton's hand moves subtly toward his sidearm. That's not your decision to make, Mr. Thornton. This is a federal matter now. The tension rises as Matthew and Burton face each other, neither willing to back down. Sarah looks between them, seeing the same conflict playing out that has haunted these hills for 30 years. The battle between truth and security, between justice and stability. Michael breaks the standoff. My father entrusted those documents to our family marshal, not to the government that may still harbor the very conspirators they expose. We'll examine them ourselves, first determine what can be safely revealed without causing unnecessary damage to the nation. Burton hesitates, weighing his options. Behind him, his men continue securing the scene, cataloging evidence, preparing to transport prisoners. One wrong move could escalate the situation dangerously. I have my orders, Burton finally says. Those documents are potential evidence in federal crimes. I'm authorized to seize them by whatever means necessary. Sarah steps between them, facing Burton directly. And if they've already been moved, if the lockbox my father mentioned is no longer where he said it would be, Burton studies her face, trying to determine if she's bluffing. Miss Mackenzie obstructing a federal investigation is a serious offense. So is conspiring to overthrow the government, Michael counters, which is exactly what Beauregard and his allies have been planning. Those documents may be the only way to identify everyone involved in the reclamation. Burton's expression reveals his internal conflict, duty versus practicality. I can give you 24 hours, he finally concedes. After that, with or without your cooperation, we're taking possession of all evidence related to this case. He turns away, barking orders to his men as the ambulance wagon carrying Robert begins to move. Eleanor calls for Sarah and Michael to join her. As they walk toward the wagon, Matthew speaks quietly. The lockbox won't be where your father said. Not if he's as careful as I think he is. Sarah glances at him. What do you mean? Matthew's eyes move to the hills beyond the farm. Your father is a military man. He wouldn't keep his most valuable intelligence in an obvious location, even one behind a false wall. That's the first place anyone would look. Then where? Michael asks. Matthew smiles slightly. Where would you hide something if you wanted it found only by someone who thinks exactly like you? Michael considers this, then understanding dawns. The cave, where Sarah first found you. That's not just a random hiding spot, is it? Matthew shakes his head. It's where Hawkins and your father first established their field headquarters during the war. If the lockbox contains what I think it does, that's where we'll find it. The ambulance wagon pulls away, heading toward Helena, with Robert fighting for his life inside. Sarah watches it disappear down the road, the events of the night settling around her like a heavy cloak. Nothing will ever be the same. Not her family, not her understanding of history, not her sense of right and wrong. Dawn breaks over the eastern hills, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. The Mackenzie Farm battleground for secrets, 3 decades old, is quiet now as federal agents complete their work. In a few hours they'll be gone, taking with them prisoners and evidence of the conspiracy that almost succeeded. But the greatest secret remains hidden, waiting to be uncovered. A truth so powerful it could heal a nation's wounds or reopen them beyond repair. We'll find the lockbox, Sarah says with quiet determination. We'll read the documents ourselves, and then we'll decide what the world needs to know. And if Beauregard finds it first, Matthew asks. Michael's expression hardens. Then we hunt him down. And we finish what our fathers started 30 years ago. The three of them stand in the growing light, united by purpose, if not yet by trust. Ahead lies a journey into America's darkest corners, where the line between hero and villain blurs, where patriotism and treason depend entirely on who tells the story. And somewhere in the mountains, Jefferson Davis Beauregard rides toward a reckoning 3 decades in the making. The reclamation has suffered a setback, but not defeat. The sons and daughters of the old Confederacy still dream of their lost cause, still work in shadows to reshape the nation in their image. The war never truly ended. It just changed form, moving from battlefields to boardrooms, from cannon fire to conspiracies. And now Sarah Mackenzie, daughter of a complicated hero, stands at the center of a conflict that will determine not just her family's future, but the soul of America itself. Morning light filters through the pine trees as Sarah, Michael, and Matthew make their way through the rocky hills toward the cave where it all began. The Mackenzie farm lies behind them now, quiet after the night's chaos, federal marshals still cataloging evidence and securing the tunnels. The air carries the crisp scent of autumn, a world untouched by the human dramas playing out beneath its surface. We should reach the cave before noon if we maintain this pace. I marked the trail when I first arrived, but kept the markings subtle. Natural configurations of stones, broken twigs pointing the way. Nothing Beauregard's men would recognize as a trail sign. Sarah studies the rough terrain ahead, recalling her first journey through these hills just days ago following Golden Bell. Was it really only yesterday? It feels like a lifetime has passed. Do you think Papa was telling the truth about the lockbox being in the cave? Michael adjusts the rifle slung over his shoulder, a precaution against both Beauregard's remaining men and the mountain lions known to prowl these hills. I'm not sure what to believe anymore. Papa built a life around secrets. Even when I was working with him gathering evidence, he compartmentalized everything. Never let any one person know the complete picture, except perhaps General Hawkins. Matthew navigates the rocky path with practiced ease despite his injured leg, stopping occasionally to check his surroundings with military precision. My father and yours were cut from the same cloth. Men shaped by war, by the moral compromises required in intelligence work. The difference is that my father decided the truth needed to be told regardless of consequences, and paid for that decision with his life. Sarah helps Matthew over a particularly difficult stretch of terrain, noticing how he winces despite his attempts to hide his pain. If the lockbox contains what Papa claims, evidence that Lincoln was killed by corrupt Union officials, not Confederate sympathizers, what will you do with that information, Matthew? It contradicts everything you've believed about your father's death. Matthew's expression remains carefully neutral, but his eyes reveal the conflict within. The truth is the truth regardless of whether it matches our preferred narrative. If your father's account is accurate, then my mission changes. But its essence remains the same. Justice for those responsible, however high their positions, however noble their reputations in history books. Michael stops abruptly, raising his hand for silence. He cocks his head, listening intently to the forest around them. Someone's following us. 2 men, maybe 3, coming from the west. Sarah strains to hear, detecting nothing but birdsong and the rustle of wind through pines. Are you sure I don't hear anything? Trust me. 7 years with the Pinkerton Agency teaches you to recognize pursuit. Grab only what's essential. We need to move faster away from the main trail. They abandon the path, cutting eastward through dense underbrush. Michael leads them up a steep incline, using natural features for cover. Boulders fall into tree stands of evergreens that block sight lines from below. After 20 minutes of punishing ascent, they pause behind a massive granite outcropping. Matthew's face is pale with exertion, his injured leg trembling visibly now. They're still following, and Michael confirms, peering carefully around the rock. But they've lost our trail. They're casting about half a mile back. Beauregard's men. Matthew checks his revolver, counting bullets. Most likely. The question is, how did they know where we were headed? Sarah considers this a disturbing possibility forming. The marshals. Burton seemed awfully interested in securing those documents himself. Michael nods grimly. That's what I'm afraid of. Beauregard mentioned having men in key government positions. What if Burton is one of them? If that's true, returning to the farm could be walking into a trap. Matthew studies the terrain ahead, mentally calculating routes and risks. The cave is less than 2 miles northeast of here. There's a ridge system that would provide cover most of the way. It's rougher terrain, but they wouldn't expect us to take such a difficult approach. Sarah glances at Matthew's injured leg. Can you make it? That wound is getting worse. I've come too far to stop now. A little pain won't kill me. Michael makes the decision. The ridge it is. We move in 5 minutes. Sarah, stay between us. Matthew, don't push yourself beyond endurance. If you fall behind, you become a liability to all of us. Matthew accepts this assessment without offense, the practicality of soldiers who understand that sentiment has no place in survival situations. They continue through increasingly difficult terrain, the landscape growing more rugged as they ascend toward the ridge. The physical challenge keeps conversation minimal, each focused on the demanding path and vigilant for signs of pursuit. After an hour of grueling progress, they reach the ridge crest. Below them stretches a panoramic view of the valley, the Mackenzie farm visible in the distance as a tiny collection of buildings. Several horses and wagons still surround it. The marshals haven't yet departed. Michael surveys the scene through a small brass spyglass. Burton's men are still searching the property, methodically building by building. They haven't given up on finding those documents. Matthew points to movement along the main road approaching the farm. More riders coming, not marshals by the look of their formation. Military, perhaps? Sarah watches the tiny figures with growing concern. How many forces are involved in this? How deep does this conspiracy go? Michael collapses the spyglass, his expression grim. The reclamation isn't some fringe movement of old Confederate sympathizers. It's embedded in government military industry. Men who've spent decades placing allies in positions of power, waiting for the right moment to reshape America according to their vision. We need to find that lockbox before they do. The complete documents may be the only way to identify everyone involved. They descend from the ridge on the far side, moving through pine forest toward the eastern hills where the cave system begins. The terrain grows more familiar to Sarah. She recognizes landmarks from her journey with Golden Bell. There, the split boulder that looks like a wolf's head. The cave entrance should be 200 yards beyond it, hidden in that stand of spruce. They approach cautiously, weapons ready, watching for any sign the cave has been discovered by Beauregard's men. The entrance appears undisturbed. The same narrow opening between boulders that Sarah found yesterday. No tracks or disturbances visible in the surrounding soil. Michael examines the entrance carefully. No signs of recent activity except these footprints. Yours and Matthew's from yesterday, I presume. Scuffed but recognizable. Sarah nods confirmation. This is where I found him wounded and hiding, the place where everything began. For you, perhaps. For some of us, it began 30 years ago. Matthew enters a first revolver drawn, moving with practiced stealth despite his injury. Sarah follows carrying a small lantern they've lit against the darkness within. Michael comes last, guarding their rear alert for any sign of pursuit. The cave opens into the chamber Sarah remembers, the place where Matthew had lain bleeding, clutching documents that would change her world forever. It seems smaller now, darker, the weight of history pressing close in the confined space. Where would the lockbox be hidden? It's not visible from here. Matthew moves methodically around the chamber, tapping walls, examining crevices, his fingers probing the stone with practiced precision. Your father and mine used this cave during the war. They would have established protocols, fallback positions, dead drops. The lockbox would be somewhere significant to them both, but not obvious to others. Michael joins the search, focusing on the rear wall of the chamber. There must be something here, some marker or sign that would mean something only to them. Sarah raises the lantern higher, illuminating the cave ceiling. Something catches her eye. Faint markings scratched into the stone overhead. Not natural for Martians, but not immediately recognizable as writing either. There, on the ceiling. Do you see it? The men look up, studying the marks. It's a map, Michael realizes. A simplified rendering of this cave system with an X marking. What a specific chamber. A hidden passage. Matthew traces the crude map with his eyes, orienting himself. If this mark represents our current position, then the X is... He moves to the eastern wall, running his hands along the rough stone surface. There should be another passage here. Nothing is immediately visible, just solid rock face. Matthew continues his examination, feeling for any irregularity, any hint of concealment. The stone shifts slightly beneath his pressure. He applies more force, and a section of wall rotates inward with the groan of stone against stone. A hidden door perfectly camouflaged against the surrounding rock. A narrow passage appears beyond, barely wide enough for one person to traverse sideways. They would have built this during the war, Michael explains. A secondary escape route known only to them. Sarah raises the lantern and illuminating the tight passage. It could be a trap. Beauregard might have found this already, could be waiting on the other side. Only one way to find out. Matthew enters first, despite Michael's protest, squeezing through the narrow opening. Sarah follows the lantern, casting elongated shadows that dance along the rough-hewn walls. The passage extends perhaps 30 feet before opening into another chamber, smaller than the first, but clearly modified by human hands. Chisel marks visible in the stone, the floor roughly leveled. In the center of this secret chamber stands a simple stone pedestal. Atop it rests a metal box. Not large, perhaps 18 inches square, secured with a combination lock of unusual design. The lockbox, exactly where Papa said it wouldn't be. Michael examines the lock without touching it. A Fielding patent combination safe lock. State-of-the-art in 1865. But why would Father tell us to look in the root cellar if he knew it was here, to mislead anyone who might be listening, Matthew suggests. He knew the marshals couldn't be fully trusted. This location would only make sense to someone who knew your father's methods, his history with Hawkins. Sarah steps forward, studying the lock. Papa said the combination was my birthday, but which format, month, day, month, year, try both. But carefully, these old locks sometimes have anti-tampering mechanisms. Sarah kneels before the pedestal, hands steady as she turns the dial. Left to clear, then right to the first number, left to the second, right to the third, left to the fourth. The lock clicks softly but doesn't open. She tries again with the alternate date format. This time the lock releases with a satisfying clunk. Inside the box lie several document portfolios bound in faded leather, each stamped with dates ranging from 1864 to 1806. Beneath them rests a smaller box of polished cherry wood inlaid with a simple star design. Michael lifts out the portfolios, reverently unwinding the leather straps that secure the first one. These are the originals. Hawkins' personal copies of the intelligence reports, financial records, witness testimonies, everything they gathered on the conspiracy within Lincoln's government. He opens the portfolio, revealing pages of faded handwriting, official documents, with government seals, newspaper clippings, and daguerreotypes of men in both military and civilian dress. Sarah examines a page of neat, precise handwriting, her father's hand, she realizes with a start. The document details meetings between Union generals and Northern industrialists outlining strategies to prolong the conflict, manipulate supply chains, and divert military funds to private enterprises. It's all here. Everything Papa described. Proof that Lincoln was killed not by Confederate sympathizers, but by corrupt Union officials who had been profiting from the war. Matthew reads over her shoulder, his expression hardening. These men were heroes in history books, statues in town squares, streets and schools named after them, all built on lies. Michael unrolls a map marked with troop movements and supply routes, annotations in multiple handwritings, showing how battles were deliberately prolonged casualties, accepted as the cost of continued profits. This would destroy the foundation myths of post-Civil War America. The noble North fighting to free slaves and preserve the Union, revealed instead as a conflict manipulated by profiteers on both sides. Sarah opens the second portfolio, finding detailed information on the Lincoln assassination conspiracy, names, dates, financial transactions showing payments to Booth and others, but orchestrated by Union officials, not Confederate agents. The Surratts were innocent. Mary Surratt, the first woman executed by the federal government, was a scapegoat. John Surratt fled not because he was guilty, but because he knew he would never receive a fair trial. That's why these documents were kept hidden. Michael realizes, revealing this truth in 1865 might have sparked another civil war. The fragile peace would have shattered completely. Matthew turns his attention to the wooden box, opening it carefully. Inside lies a single revolver. An officer's model Colt 1860 Army, beautifully maintained, its walnut grip polished by years of handling. Beside it rests a folded letter, the paper yellowed with age, sealed with red wax bearing the impression of a military insignia. My father's service revolver, Matthew says quietly, and his seal on the letter. He breaks the seal with reverent care, unfolding pages covered in a bold, slanting hand. As he reads, his expression transforms, shock giving way to something deeper, more painful. It's addressed to my mother, but he never sent it. It's dated April 14th, 1865, the day Lincoln was assassinated, the day before my father died. Sarah and Michael exchange glances, understanding the significance. Matthew continues reading silently for several moments, his hands beginning to tremble. He knew they were coming for him. He expected to be killed for what he and Robert had discovered. But there's more. He specifically instructs my mother to trust no one regarding his death except Robert Mackenzie. He says Robert is the only man with the courage and integrity to complete their mission, whatever the personal cost. Sarah feels a weight lifting from her heart. Evidence that her father was not complicit in Hawkins' death, but trusted to carry on his work. Papa didn't betray your father. He was trying to honor his final wishes by protecting the evidence. Matthew continues reading, his voice growing more strained. There's a passage here about your father, about something that happened during the war, something that bound them together beyond their official duties. What does it say? In '64, during operations behind Confederate lines, my father was captured. He was held at a plantation in Georgia, subjected to interrogation methods that... His writing becomes graphic here. Your father led an unauthorized rescue mission against direct orders from his commanding officer. He saved my father, but in the process... Matthew pauses, swallowing hard. In the process, he was forced to kill civilians, the plantation owner's family who had discovered their presence. The official record listed them as casualties of regular combat operations. But my father says the incident haunted your father, changed him fundamentally. The cave falls silent as this revelation settles over them. Sarah thinks of her father's nightmares, his reticence about certain periods of the war, his insistence on teaching her that moral choices are rarely clean or simple in times of conflict. That's why he couldn't go public with the Lincoln conspiracy even years later, Michael says quietly. He feared investigation would uncover his own war crimes, his own moral compromises. He was protecting himself, but also protecting the country from truths it might not survive. Sarah adds, he made an impossible choice: personal redemption versus national stability. The sound of distant voices interrupts their contemplation. Men approaching the cave entrance, their words indistinct, but their presence unmistakable. We've got company, Michael whispers, drawing his revolver. Quickly gather everything. We need to find another way out. Sarah repacks the portfolios and wooden box into the lockbox while Matthew searches the chamber for another exit. The voices grow louder. Multiple men moving with purpose. There's no other exit, Matthew reports grimly. Just the passage we came through. We're trapped unless we fight our way out. How many? At least 4, possibly more. Michael checks his ammunition, face set with determination. We can't let these documents fall into the wrong hands. Not after everything it's cost to preserve them. Sarah secures the lockbox mind, racing through options, each less promising than the last. They're outnumbered, potentially surrounded with limited ammunition and a wounded ally. Wait, the map on the ceiling showed other passages, other chambers. There must be connections to the larger tunnel system. She examines the chamber more carefully, noting subtle air currents, the quality of sound against different sections of wall. There, where the floor meets the north wall. Feel the draft. Michael kneels, running his hand along the junction of floor and wall, feeling the faint movement of air. Another hidden door maybe, or at least an air shaft. If we can locate the mechanism. The voices at the entrance grow louder, more distinct. Orders being given, men spreading out to search the cave systematically. They know we're here, Matthew warns. We have minutes at most. Michael continues his examination of the wall, fingers probing every crack and crevice for any sign of a release mechanism. Nothing yields to his touch. The stone is solid. If there's another exit, it's not obvious. Sarah remembers her father's military training, his lessons on strategy and unconventional thinking. What if the pedestal itself is the key? She moves to the stone plinth where the lockbox had rested, examining it from all angles. Unlike the rough-hewn chamber walls, the pedestal is smooth, precisely cut. Clearly man-made, not a natural formation. She applies pressure to its top surface, then to each side in turn. Nothing happens. Then she tries rotating it clockwise, then counterclockwise. On the third attempt, the pedestal moves slightly, accompanied by the sound of stone grinding against stone. A section of the north wall swings inward, revealing another passage. This one large enough to walk through, upright, descending at a gentle slope into darkness beyond. Sarah quickly retrieves the lockbox as Michael and Matthew position themselves to cover their retreat. The sounds from the main chamber grow more urgent. Their pursuers have discovered the first hidden passage. Go, Michael urges. Take the documents and get as far as you can. Matthew and I will hold them off, buy you time. I'm not leaving you. This is bigger than us, Sarah. Those documents could expose the entire reclamation network, prevent another civil war. They can't fall into Beauregard's hands. Sarah recognizes the logic but rejects the conclusion. We go together or not at all. I won't sacrifice either of you. Papa made that mistake 30 years ago, choosing the mission over the people he cared about. I won't repeat it. Michael begins to argue, but Matthew interrupts. She's right. Splitting up only makes us weaker. We stay together, move quickly, and use the tunnel system to our advantage. These passages were built for exactly this scenario, evading superior forces, living to fight another day. The decision made, they move into the new passage, closing the stone door behind them. The lantern illuminates a tunnel extending deep into the mountain support beams at regular intervals, suggesting careful, deliberate construction. They move quickly, but are cautiously aware that the tunnel network might harbor other threats, other pursuers. Behind them, muffled shouts indicate their exit has been discovered, the pursuit continuing. This tunnel follows a different construction style than the ones beneath the farm, Michael observes. Older, more refined stonework, probably dating to early in the war. It was built by professionals, Matthew agrees. Army engineers, not hastily assembled intelligence units. This was planned, funded, executed with precision. Part of a larger strategy. The passage branches repeatedly, forming a complex labyrinth that would disorient anyone without detailed knowledge of its layout. Michael navigates with confidence, selecting routes based on subtle markers visible only to those who know to look for them. Small notches in support beams, patterns of stones in the walls. After 20 minutes of steady progress, they pause at a junction to rest and reorient. The sounds of pursuit have faded, suggesting they've successfully evaded immediate danger. Where does this tunnel system lead, Sarah asks, catching her breath. Do you notice several exits if the original plans were followed, Michael explains. One emerges near the river about 5 miles east. Another connects to an abandoned mine shaft south of here. A third leads to what used to be a Union safe house, though I don't know if the structure still exists. We should head for the river, Matthew suggests. If we can secure a boat, we could make significantly better time than on foot, especially with my injury slowing us down. Michael considers this. The river exit is probably our best option, but we need to be careful. If Beauregard's men know about these tunnels, they might have the exits watched. Sarah examines the lockbox in the lantern light, contemplating its contents and the responsibility they represent. Once we reach safety, what do we do with these documents? Who can we trust with this information? Michael's expression hardens. No one initially. We review everything ourselves, identify every conspirator named in the evidence map out the full extent of the reclamation network. Only then do we decide what can be safely revealed and to whom. And if Beauregard finds us first, then we destroy the documents rather than let them fall into his hands. Better they're lost to history than used to further a new rebellion. They continue through the tunnel system, the air growing damper as they descend, suggesting proximity to the river. The sound of water becomes audible, not the river itself, but the subterranean streams that feed it trickling through rock and soil. Eventually, the tunnel widens into a small chamber with a wooden ladder leading upward to what appears to be a trapdoor in the ceiling. Michael climbs first, testing each rung carefully before putting his full weight on it. The wood is old, but sound, bearing his weight without complaint. At the top, he pushes gently against the trapdoor, raising it just enough to peer outside. After a moment of reconnaissance, he closes it and descends. We're in luck. The exit opens into an old boathouse, long abandoned but still standing. Through the windows, I can see the river about 30 yards away. No signs of Beauregard's men, at least not from this vantage point. Sarah ascends next to the lockbox secured across her back. Matthew follows despite his worsening injury, his face pale with exertion and pain. The boathouse is a simple structure of weathered timber. Its roof partially collapsed, tall grasses growing through the floorboards. Dust and cobwebs suggest years of abandonment. Through gaps in the walls, the river gleams in morning sunlight, its surface rippled by a gentle breeze. Michael moves to a grimy window, scanning the surroundings with practiced vigilance. The riverbank is clear in both directions. No movement, no tracks, no indication anyone's been here recently. Can we use this location to rest? Matthew asks, his injured leg finally giving out as he sinks onto an overturned crate. We need to regroup, assess our situation. Michael nods reluctantly. Briefly. I'd prefer to put more distance between us and Beauregard's men, but we all need rest. Especially you, Matthew. That leg needs proper medical attention soon. Sarah sets down the lockbox, stretching muscles stiffened by tension and exertion. Should we risk a fire? The mornings are cold this time of year. Too risky. Smoke would be visible for miles. We'll have to manage without. They settle into the abandoned boathouse, sharing the meager provisions they carried. Jerky, hard biscuits, a canteen of water. Matthew examines his leg wound, cleaning it as best he can with limited supplies. The injury has worsened, the skin around the bullet wound angry and inflamed, suggesting the beginning of infection. That needs a doctor, Sarah observes with concern. How far is Helena from here? By river, perhaps 15 miles. Half a day's journey if we find a boat and the current cooperates. And if we're pursued, Michael's expression is grim. Then we face an unpleasant decision. Stand and fight at a time and place not of our choosing, or destroy the documents and scatter, hoping at least one of us reaches safety to tell the story. They rest for an hour, recovering strength for the journey ahead. Sarah uses the time to examine the documents more thoroughly, reading through portions of her father's reports, Hawkins' intelligence assessments, financial records tracing the flow of war profiteering. The scope of the conspiracy is breathtaking. Dozens of high-ranking officials implicated, millions of dollars, diverted military decisions influenced by profit motives rather than strategic necessity. And at the center, the assassination of a president who threatened to expose it all, cleverly disguised as an act of Confederate revenge. Michael joins her, reading over her shoulder. Now you understand why Father kept these hidden all these years. The truth would have destroyed public faith in government, in military leadership, in the very cause the Union fought for. And that destruction might have been necessary. Matthew counters, approaching despite his pain. Necessary and just. The corruption never ended. It just evolved, found new forms, new hosts. The reclamation is its latest incarnation. Sarah contemplates this, weighing competing principles of truth versus stability, justice versus peace. Maybe both perspectives have merit. Maybe the timing matters most. When to reveal, how much to reveal, to whom. Papa might have been right to wait, but wrong to wait so long. A sound interrupts their philosophical debate, the distant but unmistakable report of a rifle followed by shouting. Michael moves quickly to the window, peering cautiously through the grime-streaked glass. They've found the tunnel exit. At least 6 men spreading out to search the riverbank. Beauregard is with them. How did they find us so quickly? They must have detailed knowledge of the tunnel system, Matthew suggests. Perhaps even better than ours. We need to move. Now. Sarah secures the lockbox as Michael scouts the boathouse's river-facing door. Matthew struggles to his feet, his face contorted with pain, but his determination undiminished. There's a small dock behind the boathouse, Michael reports, and what looks like a serviceable rowboat tied up, weathered but intact. Another gunshot rings out closer this time, followed by Beauregard's voice carrying across the distance. "We know you're here, Mackenzie. There's nowhere left to run. Surrender the documents and you all walk away alive." A tempting offer, Michael mutters, and completely false. "We'll never make it to the boat before they spot us," Matthew points out. "The moment we break cover, we're exposed." Sarah studies the boathouse interior, mind racing through options. Her gaze falls on a stack of old fishing equipment in the corner. Nets, traps, oilcloth tarpaulins for covering catches. "I have an idea, but you're not going to like it." She outlines her plan quickly. Simple but dangerous. Matthew will create a diversion from the landward side of the boathouse, drawing attention and fire. Meanwhile, Sarah and Michael will wrap the lockbox in oilcloth, secure it beneath the overturned rowboat, and push it into the river. They'll swim alongside, using the boat for cover until they are beyond rifle range. "That's suicide," Michael objects. "The current, the cold water, the exposed position, they'd cut us down before we made 50 yards. Not if Matthew gives them a more pressing concern." Matthew nods slowly, understanding her logic. A fire. This old timber would burn quickly. The smoke and flames would demand their immediate attention, especially if I add a few diversionary shots to suggest a defensive position. "You'd be sacrificing yourself," Sarah says quietly. "Once the fire takes hold, your escape route will be cut off. My leg is infected. I'm slowing you down, endangering the mission. This way I can contribute one last time to my father's cause. To justice." Michael begins to object, then reconsiders the tactical assessment overriding personal concerns. "He's right, Sarah. With his injury, he'd never survive the swim. This gives both the documents and us the best chance of reaching Helena." The decision settles heavily between them, the weight of necessity bending moral considerations. Matthew begins gathering materials for the fire. Old nets, rotting wood, anything that will burn quickly and produce substantial smoke. Sarah helps Michael wrap the lockbox in layers of oilcloth, securing it with fishing line, creating a waterproof package they can attach beneath the overturned rowboat. Outside, Beauregard's men continue their methodical search, moving closer to the boathouse with each passing minute. When the fire starts, wait for the first response, then move quickly to the dock, Matthew instructs. Once you're in the water, don't stop for anything, no matter what you hear behind you. Sarah embraces him briefly, emotion overcoming tactical considerations. "This isn't goodbye. We'll send help once we reach Helena." Matthew's smile is gentle but realistic. "We both know better than that, but I appreciate the sentiment." He checks his revolver one final time, counting the remaining bullets. 5 minutes. That's how long I'll wait after you enter the water. Then I start the fire and the distraction. Michael clasps Matthew's hand in silent understanding, one soldier to another, acknowledging the sacrifice without diminishing it with unnecessary words. They move to their positions. Michael and Sarah by the river door, with the wrapped lockbox and overturned rowboat, Matthew at the landward side, with his makeshift incendiary materials. The shouts outside grow closer. Men moving through the tall grass surrounding the boathouse, rifles ready, closing in on their quarry. Michael gives Matthew one final nod, then he and Sarah slip silently through the river door onto the small dock. The rowboat is as Michael described, weathered but sound, its wooden hull bleached by years of sun exposure. They work quickly to secure the packaged lockbox beneath it, then position themselves to push it into the water at Matthew's signal. Inside the boathouse, Matthew begins his countdown, mentally preparing for his final act in a drama 30 years in the making. The son of General Hawkins, completing the mission his father began on the last full day of his life. There is peace in this symmetry, this closing of a circle. He strikes a match against the rough wall, touching it to his carefully arranged materials. The flame catches, immediately spreading through dried nets and ancient timber with hungry enthusiasm. Smoke billows upward as Matthew moves to a window facing Beauregard's approaching men. He fires once into the air, the universal signal of defiance of a position defended. The response is immediate, shouts of alarmed men redirecting toward the now smoking boathouse, rifles raised. Outside, Sarah and Michael hear the shot, their signal. They push the rowboat into the water, slipping quietly into the cold river alongside it. The current catches them immediately, carrying boat and swimmers away from the boathouse as flames become visible through its windows. Beauregard's voice rises above the growing commotion. The boathouse, they're burning the evidence. Get in there now. Matthew fires again, this time aiming at the approaching men, forcing them to seek cover. The flames spread rapidly, consuming the dry timber, turning the ancient structure into a pyre visible for miles. In the river, Sarah and Michael swim alongside the overturned rowboat, using it for both flotation and concealment. The cold water numbs their limbs, but the current does most of the work, carrying them steadily downstream away from danger. Behind them, the boathouse becomes fully engulfed, a column of black smoke rising into the clear autumn sky. Gunshots punctuate the roar of flames, Matthew's last stand buying them precious minutes of escape. Sarah looks back once, witnessing the structure's collapse in a shower of sparks and flaming debris. There's no sign of Matthew, no indication whether he escaped the inferno or perished within it. The uncertainty will haunt her, she knows, whatever the outcome of their journey. The river carries them around a bend, the burning boathouse disappearing from view. They continue swimming alongside the rowboat, the current strengthening as the river narrows, increasing their speed and distance from Beauregard's men. After nearly an hour in the water, when their muscles scream with cold and exertion, they guide the rowboat toward the eastern bank, where a small cove offers shelter from the main current. They drag themselves and their precious cargo onto the rocky shore, shivering violently in the afternoon air. "We need to warm up," Sarah manages through chattering teeth. "Build a fire, dry our clothes. We'll die of exposure otherwise." Michael nods agreement, too cold to argue the tactical risk. They gather wood from the surrounding forest, build a small fire in a protected hollow where the smoke will disperse through tree canopy rather than rising in a visible column. As warmth gradually returns to their bodies, they check the lockbox. Still secure and it's waterproof, wrapping the documents inside dry and intact. The physical evidence of a conspiracy that reshaped American history, that continues to influence its course through the machinations of men like Beauregard. "Do you think Matthew survived?" Sarah asks, voicing the question that has troubled her since they left the boathouse. Michael's expression is somber. "The structure was fully engulfed when we rounded the bend. If he was still inside, his tactical assessment remains unfinished, but its conclusion is clear enough. He saved us, saved the documents, completed his father's mission. And now we must complete ours. Helena is still at least 8 miles downstream. We should rest briefly, then continue before Beauregard can organize a pursuit along the riverbanks." They sit in silence for several minutes, absorbing the events of the past 24 hours. The revelations about Robert's past, Michael's return from the dead, Matthew's sacrifice, the truth about Lincoln's assassination and its aftermath. So much history rewritten, so many certainties dissolved. "What will you do with these documents once we reach Helena?" Sarah finally asks. Who receives this truth first? Michael considers the question carefully. "There are federal judges I trust, men beyond Beauregard's influence or the reach of the reclamation. We present them with selected evidence, first enough to secure warrants for key conspirators without revealing the full historical implications. And the Lincoln assassination evidence, the proof that would rewrite history books, that requires more careful consideration. Some truths are too destructive to release all at once, too contrary to national mythology. Perhaps Papa was right about that much, at least." Sarah watches the flames dance before them, casting shifting shadows across their faces, across the lockbox that contains America's darkest secrets. "Truth emerges in its own time," she observes, "like water finding its way through stone. We can guide it, channel it, but we can't stop it forever." Michael smiles faintly, recognizing their father's philosophy in her words. "You sound like him, the idealist beneath the pragmatist." They rest another hour, then return to the river, riding the rowboat and placing the lockbox securely inside. With makeshift paddles fashioned from broken branches, they continue their journey downstream toward Helena, toward whatever justice awaits at the end of this long-delayed reckoning. The afternoon sun casts long shadows across the water as they navigate the gentle current, remaining vigilant for any sign of pursuit. But the river remains empty save for occasional wildlife. Ospreys hunting fish, deer coming to drink at the shoreline, oblivious to the human dramas playing out in their midst. As dusk approaches, the distant buildings of Helena appear on the horizon. Civilization's safety, the promise of allies who might help them expose the reclamation and prevent its dark vision from becoming reality. I need to check on Papa and Mama when we arrive, Sarah says, breaking a long silence. Make sure they're safe, that Beauregard hasn't targeted them in retaliation. Michael nods agreement. The hospital will be our first stop, then the federal courthouse to speak with Judge Morrison. He was an associate of General Sherman, firmly opposed to any Confederate resurgence. If anyone will help us navigate this evidence properly, it's him. As they approach the outskirts of Helena, a new concern emerges. How to enter the city undetected, how to reach their destinations without alerting Beauregard's allies who might be watching for them. The sun dips below the western mountains as they guide their boat towards a secluded landing several hundred yards from the main docks. The growing darkness provides cover as they secure the craft and remove the precious lockbox. We'll approach from the east, Michael decides, through the residential district rather than the main thoroughfare. Less chance of being recognized. They move cautiously through gathering shadows, two figures carrying a metal box between them, their clothes still damp from the river, their faces marked by exhaustion and determination. Few citizens pay them any attention. Just another pair of travelers arriving in a frontier town where unusual sights are commonplace. The hospital occupies a 3-story brick building near the town center, its windows illuminated against the darkening sky. They approach cautiously, wary of sentries Beauregard might have posted to watch for them. The main entrance appears unguarded. They slip inside, where the familiar sense of carbolic acid and medicinal herbs permeate the air. A nurse at the reception desk directs them to the 3rd floor, where Robert Mackenzie lies recovering from his gunshot wound. They find Eleanor seated beside Robert's bed, her face lined with worry, but composed, her hand resting gently on her husband's. She looks up as they enter, relief flooding her features. Sarah, Michael, thank God you're safe. She embraces them both, noticing their damp clothing, the metal box they carry, the exhaustion evident in their bearing. You found it, she says, not a question, but a recognition. The documents, the evidence. Robert has been asking for them, insisting they must be secured. Sarah approaches the bed where her father lies. Robert Mackenzie looks diminished against the white sheets, his robust frame made frail by blood loss and trauma. But his eyes are clear and alert as they focus on his children, on the lockbox they carry. You went to the cave, he says, voice weak but steady. You found Hawkins' lockbox. Yes, Papa. We have everything. The intelligence reports, the financial records, the evidence about Lincoln's assassination. And Matthew Thornton helped us. Sarah's voice falters. He sacrificed himself so we could escape with the documents. Robert closes his eyes briefly, absorbing this news. Hawkins would be proud of his son, as I am proud of both of you. Michael sets the lockbox on a chair, his expression troubled. We read the documents, Father. All of them, including Hawkins' letter about what happened in Georgia in '64, about the civilians. Robert's face reveals nothing, but his hand tightens on Eleanor's. Then you understand the choices I made. Why I couldn't reveal the Lincoln conspiracy even years later. The investigation would have uncovered everything, including my own war crimes. You were following orders, Michael says, doing what was necessary in wartime. Was I, Robert's gaze is penetrating despite his weakness? Or did I cross a line that should never be crossed, even in war? Did I become what we were fighting against? The room falls silent as this question hangs between them. The moral complexity that has shaped their family's destiny for 3 decades, the burden Robert has carried alone until now. Eleanor breaks the silence, her voice gentle but firm. What matters now is what we do with these documents, with this truth. Beauregard and his reclamation must be stopped, but without destroying the country in the process. Sarah opens the lockbox, removing the smaller wooden box containing Hawkins's revolver and letter. There's something else you should see, Papa. Something Matthew wanted you to have. She places the revolver in Robert's hand. His fingers close around the familiar grip, recognition and memory washing across his features. Hawkins' service weapon. He carried it from Bull Run to Appomattox, and his final letter addressed to his wife, but never sent. He mentions you specifically, Papa. He trusted you to complete your mission to protect the evidence until the right time. Robert examines the revolver with reverent fear, then turns his attention to the letter Sarah offers. He reads in silence, his expression shifting from apprehension to relief as Hawkins' words absolve him of suspected betrayal. He knew, Robert says finally, knew they were coming for him, knew I might be forced to make impossible choices afterward. But he never doubted your integrity, Sarah points out, even at the end. A commotion in the hallway interrupts this moment of reconciliation. Hurried footsteps, urgent voices. The door opens to reveal Marshal Burton, accompanied by two deputies. His expression as he surveys the room is unreadable. Mackenzie, we've been looking for you, all of you. Michael moves protectively toward the lockbox, hand drifting toward his revolver. How did you find us? Burton's smile holds no warmth. This is Helena's son. Word travels fast when strangers arrive by river carrying mysterious cargo, especially when those strangers match the description of federal fugitives. We're not fugitives, Sarah protests. We're protecting vital evidence of a conspiracy against the government. So you claim. Burton's gaze shifts to the lockbox. Those would be the documents your father mentioned. The ones you refused to surrender to federal authorities. Michael stands his ground, suspicion evident in his posture. Federal authorities who may include members of the very conspiracy we're exposing. Tell me, Marshal, where is Beauregard now? Did he reach Helena before us? Have you spoken with him? I don't know anyone by that name, Burton replies, his composure unwavering. But I do know that interfering with a federal investigation, removing evidence from an active crime scene, and assaulting federal officers are serious offenses. Robert struggles to sit up, Eleanor supporting him. Burton, whatever you're planning, consider carefully. Those documents contain evidence implicating high-ranking officials in crimes dating back to Lincoln's assassination. Officials whose descendants remain in positions of power today. Burton's expression reveals nothing. All the more reason they should be in proper federal custody. For security. The tension in the room builds as intentions remain unclear, loyalties unconfirmed. Is Burton a legitimate lawman doing his duty, or another piece in Beauregard's conspiracy? The document's fate, and perhaps their own, hangs on the answer. Then a new voice enters the conversation, familiar but unexpected. I believe I can offer a solution to this impasse. Matthew Thornton stands in the doorway, supported by a walking stick, his clothing singed and torn, his face smudged with soot but very much alive. Sarah gasps in recognition and relief. Matthew, you survived. Barely, he acknowledges with a pained smile. The fire provided more smoke than I anticipated. I was forced to exit through the riverside just after you departed. It's been an interesting journey catching up to you. His attention turns to Burton, his expression hardening. Marshal, I believe you know my associate, Judge William Morrison of the Federal Circuit Court. He's very interested in these documents, particularly as they relate to ongoing investigations into corruption within the Marshal Service itself. Burton's composure slips for the first time, uncertainty flashing across his features. Morrison has no jurisdiction here. This is a federal matter under my authority. Actually, a new voice interjects as an elderly but distinguished man enters the room, a federal marshal's justice in judicial robes rather than the expected frontier judge. I have precisely that jurisdiction, especially when the Marshal Service is potentially compromised. William Morrison, Federal Circuit Court for the Western Territories. And you, Burton, have some explaining to do about your communications with Jefferson Davis Beauregard over the past 48 hours. Burton's hand moves toward his sidearm, but the deputies with him step back. Weapons remaining holstered, their loyalties shifting with the changing power dynamic. Judge Morrison approaches the lockbox, his bearing dignified but approachable. Are these the documents I've heard so much about? The evidence concerning both Lincoln's assassination and this modern conspiracy? The reclamation. Michael nods confirmation. Complete records, sir. Financial transactions, meeting minutes, military orders, witness testimonies. Everything General Hawkins and my father compiled during and after the war. Morrison turns to Matthew. And you would be General Hawkins' son. The man who spent years tracing these documents, assembling the connections between past conspiracy and present danger, Matthew acknowledges this with a respectful nod. My father gave his life to preserve this evidence, Your Honor. Robert Mackenzie protected it for 30 years at great personal cost. Now the reclamation threatens to undo everything they fought to preserve. The union itself, though, in a form few would recognize until too late. Morrison's attention returns to Burton, who stands rigidly by the door trapped between fight and flight. Marshal Burton, you are relieved of duty pending investigation into your connections with Beauregard and the reclamation. Deputies escort the marshal to the courthouse where federal agents from Washington await. Burton's face contorts with fury as the deputies move to comply not with his orders, but the judge's. You're making a mistake, Morrison. There are powerful men behind this, men who won't forget who stood against them. The only mistake, Morrison replies calmly, was believing you could subvert the Constitution you swore to defend. Take him away. As Burton is removed, Judge Morrison turns back to the Mackenzie family, and Matthew, his expression grave but compassionate. I understand the burden you've carried, all of you. The impossible choices, the secrets kept for what seemed like the greater good. Now we face another such choice. How much of this truth America is ready to hear, and in what form? Robert speaks from his hospital bed, voice weak but resolute. The full truth about Lincoln's assassination might destroy public faith in government, in the very idea of America. But concealing it allows the corruption to continue to evolve into new forms like the reclamation. Perhaps there is a middle path, Morrison suggests. The complete exposure of the reclamation conspiracy using enough historical evidence to establish its origins without undermining foundational national myths. The present danger addressed fully, the historical context provided selectively. Sarah considers this compromise. Justice served, but history cushioned truth emerging gradually rather than in a devastating flood. Like water finding its way through stone, she says softly. Morrison looks at her questioningly. A concept my father taught me, Sarah explains. Truth emerges in its own time. We can guide it, channel it, but we can't stop it forever. The judge smiles, recognizing wisdom that transcends the younger woman's years. Precisely, Miss Mackenzie. Some truths must be handled with care, not to prevent their emergence, but to ensure they heal rather than destroy. In the days that follow, this philosophy guides their approach to the explosive documents. Judge Morrison establishes a special federal grand jury operating with unusual secrecy given the sensitivity of the evidence. The reclamation conspiracy is exposed systematically, its members identified and arrested across multiple states and territories. Beauregard himself eludes immediate capture, fleeing west towards sympathetic enclaves in the territories. But with his network dismantled, his financial support severed, his political protection withdrawn, his threat diminishes from national conspiracy to personal vendetta. Robert Mackenzie recovers slowly from his wounds, the physical healing accompanied by a spiritual unburdening, as secrets held for decades are finally shared with his family, with carefully selected authorities, with history itself, though in measured, responsible ways. The Lincoln assassination evidence is handled with particular care, enough revealed to secure justice against surviving conspirators and their descendants, but not so much as to shatter public faith in post-Civil War institutions. A gradual recalibration of historical understanding rather than a revolutionary demolition. Matthew Thornton finds a measure of peace in vindicating his father's memory, in completing the mission begun 30 years earlier. Though the full truth about General Hawkins remains known to only a select few, his son carries forward his legacy of principled service, joining Morrison's staff as a special investigator, focusing on corruption cases. Michael Mackenzie, no longer a ghost serving shadowy government interests, establishes himself openly in Helena, using his Pinkerton training and connections to build a legitimate investigation agency specializing in corporate malfeasance, particularly cases involving railway companies and land speculation. And Sarah, the daughter who followed a pig into the hills and discovered a conspiracy that changed her world, finds her own path forward. The experiences have awakened something in her, a talent for uncovering truth, for connecting disparate facts into coherent narratives. She begins writing for the Helena Independent, her articles on frontier justice and government accountability gaining attention beyond Montana's borders. 1 year after the events at the Mackenzie farm, the family gathers to commemorate both what was lost and what was gained. Robert fully recovered physically, if not emotionally, from his wounds, stands with Eleanor on the porch of their restored farmhouse. The bank foreclosure long canceled the property, now recognized for its historical significance, though few know its complete story. Michael arrives from Helena, bringing news of Beauregard's reported death in a mining dispute in the Arizona territory. Perhaps true, perhaps another disappearance into shadow. The reclamation's remnants continue to operate in isolated pockets, but without central leadership or significant resources. Matthew visits from Washington, where his work with Judge Morrison has expanded to a national commission investigating corruption in federal agencies, a legacy of both their father's unfinished work now continuing in the light rather than darkness. Sarah returns from a journalistic assignment in Chicago, where her reporting on labor conditions in meatpacking facilities has drawn both acclaim and controversy. She brings the family a gift: advance copies of her first book, Shadows of the Republic, Corruption and Redemption in Post-Civil War America. The volume represents their compromise with history, revealing significant truths about the era's corruption while protecting certain details of Lincoln's assassination that might prove too damaging to national cohesion. A guided emergence of truth water, finding its path through stone at a pace that allows understanding rather than destruction. They gather around the table where it all began, where Sarah first concealed Matthew's documents, where Robert first confronted Beauregard, where a family divided by secrets began its journey toward reconciliation. Golden Bell watches from her pen the stubborn pig whose wandering led Sarah to Matthew, to the cave, to the truth. Some might call it coincidence, others destiny. But in the Mackenzie household, they've come to recognize it as something else entirely: the inexorable movement of truth toward light, finding unexpected channels when direct paths are blocked. As evening falls, they stand together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the rocky hills in gold and crimson. The same hills that concealed tunnels and secrets, that witnessed both deception and heroism, that hold stories still waiting to be told when America is ready to hear them. For now, it is enough that they stand together, a family once fractured by history's weight, now united in carrying it forward with integrity and care. The burden shared is lighter, the path clearer, the future uncertain but faced together. The pig that changed everything grunts contentedly from her pen, oblivious to her role in altering the course of both a family and a nation. Sometimes the greatest catalysts for change are the most ordinary, the most overlooked. A wandering pig, a curious daughter, a buried truth finally finding its way to light. 5 years have passed since the events at the Mackenzie farm. The old boathouse where Matthew made his stand has been rebuilt stronger than before, a quiet memorial to choices made in desperate moments. The river flows on, carrying stories and secrets, some revealed, others still waiting for their time. Judge Morrison's careful approach to the reclamation conspiracy proved wiser than many expected. Key conspirators faced justice without upending the nation's fragile understanding of its own history. Some truths emerged gradually, others remain sealed in government archives, awaiting a future generation better prepared to reconcile with their implications. Robert Mackenzie stands at his property's edge, surveying the rocky hills that once seemed worthless. The tunnels beneath have been officially sealed by Army engineers, though locals whisper that not all passages were found, that secrets still linger in the darkness below. Like America itself, built upon ideals, yet harboring contradictions, the land contains both light and shadow. The Republic endured as it has through other crises, bending but not breaking under the weight of its imperfect history. Men like Beauregard failed not because their grievances lacked substance, but because they sought to address legitimate concerns through illegitimate means. America's strength lies not in its perfection, but in its capacity for self-correction, however delayed or incomplete. In Washington, Matthew Thornton's work continues through the Hawkins Commission, rooting out corruption without fanfare or public recognition. Some battles are fought in newspaper headlines, others in quiet hearing rooms where dedicated men and women guard institutions against enemies, both foreign and domestic. His father would understand this balance between publicity and discretion, between revolution and reform. Sarah's journalism has expanded beyond Montana, her carefully calibrated revelations about post-Civil War corruption earning both acclaim and criticism. Like the water she once described, finding its path through stone truth continues its patient journey into national consciousness under her measured guidance. Not all at once, but steadily, persistently, with respect for both justice and stability. Michael's investigation agency has uncovered 3 more reclamation cells operating in Western territories, their plans disrupted before implementation. The conspiracy's remnants persist like embers after a forest fire, requiring vigilance, but no longer threatening national conflagration. Some adversaries are defeated completely. Others merely contained, managed through eternal watchfulness. The Mackenzie farm prospers modestly, neither a fortune nor a failure. Golden Bell has offspring now stubborn pigs who occasionally escape their pen to explore the hills beyond, though none have yet discovered anything more significant than acorns and mud puddles. Some destinies occur only once in a generation. Eleanor tends roses where gun battles once raged their blooms, persistent reminders that beauty follows devastation when given sufficient care and patience. She has made peace with Michael's false death, with Robert's necessary secrets, with a family history more complex than the simple narrative she once believed. Love accommodates truth, however difficult, when accompanied by understanding. At night, Robert still dreams of tunnels and conspiracies of choices made and paths not taken. But he wakes to a home no longer haunted by secrets, to a family united in carrying forward a complicated legacy. Perfect redemption exists only in fiction, but reconciliation with history, with family, with oneself remains possible even after decades of division. America continues its own journey toward reconciliation with its full history, neither the sanitized version taught in school books, nor the cynical interpretation that sees only corruption in every achievement. The truth, as always, lies in the difficult middle ground, where ideals and realities coexist, where heroes harbor flaws and villains occasionally serve virtue. Some truths about Lincoln's death remain sealed, awaiting a future when their revelation might heal rather than harm. Other secrets from that era have gradually entered historical understanding, context, added to events once viewed in stark, simplistic terms. Each generation reinterprets the past according to its own needs and capacities, neither fully objective nor completely blinded by its prejudices. As sunset paints the Montana hills in gold and shadow, the Mackenzies gather on their porch, witnesses to both history's burden and its possibility. Tomorrow brings new challenges. Rumors of reclamation sympathizers gaining influence in Arizona politics. Matthew's investigation into military contract irregularities. Sarah's upcoming journey to document labor conditions in California's growing industrial centers. The war never truly ended, it merely transformed as conflicts do. But so too did the courage that confronts them, the integrity that contains them, the wisdom that channels them toward constructive resolution. For every Beauregard plotting in shadow, a Mackenzie family stands in light, imperfect, but steadfast, guarding the Republic, not through blind allegiance, but through principled vigilance. The pig that changed everything died peacefully last winter, honored in her way by the family whose destiny she altered. Sometimes the most profound changes begin with the smallest actions, the most ordinary choices. A wandering pig, a curious daughter, a nation continuously reimagining itself, stumbling toward its highest ideals through the dedicated service of citizens who understand that patriotism lies not in comfortable myths, but in the harder work of confronting truth with courage, integrity, and hope.